Boom! We are live Friday evening. Hope everybody is blessed, staying safe. We had the door open today. That's how nice it is out here. It's glorious because we like to start podcasts talking about the weather. Guys, this is a good one. This is something that we haven't had. We haven't had this gentleman on for 4 years almost. So we're doing back-to-back Ottawa episodes. Last week with Dominion City, and we were discussing this young man in that episode, and it was very convenient because we did it back-to-back, but the opposite way around in 2017. So, mate, I'm just going to get right into it. What's good, y'all? This is C-Certified Brewhead, and welcome to episode 51 of Beer Not Just a Podcast Adjunct Series Quarantine Edition. This evening, we are taking you guys back to Ottawa once again. This gentleman also was on back in 2017 alongside Dominion City that you guys may have heard last episode. And, it was much overdue. It kind of just worked out this way that we had them back-to-back, but couldn't be happier to have the gentleman back. We have also guest co-hosting this evening, Noah Forrest from Beerism, who hasn't been in for a little bit. And we have Matt Tweedy from Tooth and Nail Brewery. There he is. Welcome, boys. Great to see your faces.
You
Great
too.
To see ya.
Do I just realize, Matt, you don't have a beard. What's up with that?
No, what's up with that? So this is a good question. It's really funny because one of the first interviews I think I ever did for Tooth and Nail when we opened, somebody said, well, what makes you different than, other breweries? I said, well, I don't have a beard. COVID definitely presented a pretty terrible looking beard for a while. But to be honest with you, I think at this point right now, I'm just trying to shake the last year, look forward, present myself well, work on a bunch of different leadership ideas and try to kind of present myself a little bit more tight and better and polished. So we'll see how long that lasts.
I like it. It does make a difference. It's just like, I didn't notice it until I'm just staring at the screen. And normally, like when we've joked about it before, unintentionally, I'm looking at, 2-3 other bearded white guys, typically with glasses. And I was like, oh shit, that doesn't have a beard. Like I couldn't.
None of us can see properly for some reason.
None of us can see. I guess it's the beer. It ruins your eyesight. I just feel like it's. I like it. It's.
Oh, I don't know, dude. I just had an eye doctor test yesterday, and we're not going to start talking about age and where we're at here, but I'm moving into progressive lenses. So if you want to talk about glasses, man, this is a very difficult and challenging time in my life.
Have you considered LASIK by any chance?
I asked him about it yesterday. I've got pretty bad astigmatism in one eye. He's not too sure that I can qualify, but we'll see.
So once again, not to go into it, I also have an astigmatism. I got LASIK by the doctor who invented the astigmatism machine in 2006, I want to say. And 3 years later, I had to wear glasses again. They told me I'd be in my mid-40s. And then 3 years later,
right.
But I went from -5 to it was 0.25, super low. And even now I'm at 0.1. I'm at -1 or something, maybe 1.5. So it's not bad, but it was worth it for those 3 years. Is the weirdest feeling. And it's a very strange thing when someone's cutting the cornea or whatever it is open and then sticking a laser in. Super.
Yeah, my wife Dana just had it done.
Oh, she did it? How was it for her?
Oh yeah, she swears by it. She loves it. It's the greatest thing she's ever decided to do, she says.
It was just that moment.
I mean, aside from marry me, right?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Look at it. Drink. Come on now. It was just like when you finish and you sit up and you're like, oh shit, I can see. It's just the trippiest feeling in the world. It's very, very strange. I'm sure people don't give a fuck too much about that. So let's get into beers. You already cracked yours, Matt. We are going to be drinking the Lupo Solitario with Diamant. Diamant? How do you say it? Diamant hops and.
As far as I'm aware.
It's far. Well, I trust you, Mr. Forrest.
I am going to start off with a nice light 10% Imperial Stout here, which is part of
That's how you roll.
Tooth and Nail's Black is Beautiful beer, which I'm sure we'll probably get into a little later.
Oh yes, we would definitely.
Discussion-wise.
Very, very happy that you guys.
And I've had this one before. I got 2 cans from my lovely father-in-law who grabbed them for me.
What a champion.
Amazing.
Mid-pandemic.
You want to
Yeah.
tell us maybe about
Great.
the beers themselves that we're drinking now, Matt? Maybe start with the Keller, since a little on the light side. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for years we were doing our single hop pale ale series. It's a pretty fun thing to do when you've got a brew pub, right? And you can circle through these different beers. And for us, I mean, the single hop series personally has just been a wicked experience because you can thoroughly understand the depth of bitterness, flavor, aroma of a certain hop, and how that bitterness comes across from a quality perspective. Not all hops are cut the same. So just because you've got a hop at 5 alpha acid and another at 5 alpha acid, the bitterness from those hops can come through very different. So it's been a wicked education, and many of the hops in the pale ale series ended up in many of our beers because we just like them so much, and many of them, kind of got kicked to the curb because we didn't like them so much. But I always really wanted to do it with a lager, and especially with a pilsner. And when I had Lupolo by Oxbow in Maine, it really kind of set the idea for this Italian style pilsner, as people are calling them.
Okay.
But just something with a bit of dry hopping, an unfiltered young version of a pilsner, because if you lager it too long, those hops might become somewhat too refined in some ways that you may not actually get what you're looking for out of them if you're trying to learn them in and out. So anyways, we started the Lupo Solitario series probably about 2.5 years ago, I can't remember. And yeah, I mean, the beer itself, just through practicing the recipe, gets better, and now we get to explore these new hops. We just did 2 of them with the help of BSG Canada. The first one being a brand new German hop, Aurum, and then this being the other brand new German hop, Diamant.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm super thrilled with this one. I mean, the Aurum was really nice. It's funny because sometimes I try things that I'm not always the hugest fan of, and one of those things is I don't particularly like a lot of the character you get from a dry hopped pilsner. However, with this one, I'm not getting any of the character I don't like. I'm really just getting all of the aromas I do like. And a lot of what I don't like from those dry hop beers is, and maybe it has to do with the cool fermentation and the temperature of dry hopping and all of these things. I mean, we've kind of got the process honed in, but I often just get a real kind of chlorophyll, fresh cut grass kind of thing from dry hopping pilsners. And we've dry hopped Vim and Vigor before, and I hope to never do it again.
Was that the
it just
5th
kind
anniversary?
What's that?
Was that the 5th anniversary version?
No, that one was dry hopped with
Sorry.
saws, and saws actually works out really quite well on a dry hop. I find I never really worry about that one.
Okay.
Just some of the other hops, just maybe a little too green. And if you can get that amount of oil secured into the wort before fermentation, then you run into this situation where that fermentation helps to promote those hop flavors and things like that. So we stopped dry hopping Vim and Vigor in the first year. And I much prefer it the way it is now. But I don't know, there's something about this that I really, really enjoy. I don't get a grassiness. I get hops. Like I get hop oils jumping out there.
Yeah, I'm like,
this is very much to me like
Go on, no.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, I've had a few versions, not the one you're drinking right now. And as much as it seems that you do get a hop character for sure, and when you're drinking it, you quickly realize you're not drinking a traditional pilsner or a lager or like a lager that you're used to. There's something different about it, but it, like you said, it doesn't give you that like punch in the same way as a lot of these dry hop lagers have, and the fruitiness I found a little bit more restrained, and just everything was in balance. I remember being really enjoying them when I had them. They're excellent. I mean, that's something that you seem to have put a lot of effort into is mastering clean clean beers, and even your pale ales and stuff like that. There's a certain roundness to them, and just making something that a lot of people think is simple taste simple when it's actually one of the harder things to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've always enjoyed what you guys do tremendously.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's so funny to hear that sometimes, and I appreciate, I take that as a great compliment, because I'm pretty hell-bent on that being the way that I brew. But without, discussing other brewers and other approaches, I don't really understand, in my brain, how could there be another approach? I mean, a beer should be very clean. It should be very well fermented. It should have a balance of flavors that gives it immense drinkability. And yet we get to play with flavors that are really quite big. And so you should be able to extract those flavors and create something of complexity and enjoyment and all of these things. But to me, the balance and cleanliness, I mean, that's everything. And it's what I search for when I'm out purchasing beers and trying new beers. And when you get to the point where you've been brewing long enough, you kind of get this curse where you've kind of tasted every off flavor out there, and you can't unlearn that at that point. So even when you get some really expressive and really fantastic beers, you can be in a position where the second you taste that one little flaw, it's like, well, shit, I don't like this anymore. It's terrible.
Yeah, it like ruins the entire experience. Once you, it's like you find it and you're like, oh, I can't unfind this now.
That's it. Yeah, and I try not to sweat that stuff too much. I mean, I've definitely got some peers that can really dissect a glass of beer, and I think, shit, just drink the thing. Like, it's like we're here to enjoy ourselves too. But there's a fine balance there that is tricky to step away from. When that's really what your ultimate job is. So
what I want to ask briefly, I actually really don't know, what is specifically a Kellerpils as opposed to a Keller beer or a Pilsner straight up and down?
Well, I mean, the term Keller is German for cellar. And so you're looking at an unfiltered product. The idea is that it is a product drawn directly from the tank in the cellar.
Okay.
Now they've gone on to since be packaged. You might have heard of Zwickel beer.
Yes.
Same idea. Zwickel is actually your sample port. That's what it's called.
Okay.
And so the difference between something like this and Vim and Vigor is we'll release this after 4 weeks. So it really does not spend a lot of time lagering. We try, you may pick up some really light sulfur in it and that real kind of fresh, uplifting character coming off the nose, and the unfiltered aspect as well. Just really trying to serve it as fresh and as young as possible so that those hop expressions are at their kind of peak before that lagering starts to really refine it and squash it down a little bit.
Love it. That makes sense. Cool. Thank you for breaking it down.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Like, obviously beers that are, or let's just say lagers in general, and slight variations of lagers, are a beer style that took over the world and have always been popular and probably always will be popular. But within the kind of beer geek craft beer scene, there was a lot of pushback against that style at the beginning. Like, people didn't. It was like your dad's beer or whatever. It was the beer that no one wanted anymore because it's like that's all that beer was, right? And bad versions of that beer, etc. And so like the rise of the IPA, and then that shifted, the IBU wars or whatever, and now we're in the haze, and then now we're with the smoothies and the pastry stouts and all the crazy shit. But very recently, in the last year particularly, I'd say in like Montreal, maybe Ottawa, I don't know, although probably a little bit longer in the States, the lager has kind of had is having a quiet comeback, and I don't even know how quiet it is, because it's even like breweries that are concentrating entirely on haze and crazy adjunct laden stouts and stuff are now brewing a Helles or a Pilsner on tap, right? Whereas before that would never happen. So I'm just curious, since you've been kind of always doing that from the beginning, amongst other things, obviously, have you noticed like a desire in your patrons or your orders or whatever for lagers again, or has it been pretty consistent throughout your, you're what, like 5-6 years old now at this point?
Yeah, just 5.5, I guess. I mean, interestingly enough, like, what we sell to licensees or out of the store tends to be a little bit different from in the bar. Vim and Vigor was never really intended to be, a quote unquote flagship type thing. I had a true passion for Pilsners, especially, but also, general, a lot of different lagers in general. And I think that at the end of the day, that style of beer is the real true brewer's beer. Because as you kind of just went through the cycle of it all, right? Like you get into craft beer because, there's a flavor there that you quite can't put your finger on, right? So you have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, right? Which to me is one of the holy grails. And it's just like, the first time you have that after you've been drinking, like, Wildcat in my case, growing up,
exactly,
you're like, wow, that's bitter, man, and then you get used to that. You're like, well, what's more bitter and what's more hoppy? And then you start going through your IPA phase, which never dies, thankfully, in some ways. And I think we've taken it to an insane place at this point. But then you're into IPAs, and then you're into double IPAs. And when you get into double IPAs, you try a barley wine. You're like, holy shit, I love that barley wine. And then you get into bourbon barrel-aged stouts. And now you're drinking 14, 15% beers that blow your mind. And then you try a sour, and you're like, well, forget it. I'm going to switch over to this side. And then you have the sour. And then you get into the pastry stouts. You get into all these things. And all of a sudden, you're like, man, I kind of just miss sitting down and, like, drinking 6 cans of beer on a Friday night with a friend, and not, like, having to recall the tales from the night before the next day. And so there's something about those simple 5% beers that you get back to, and then you start to kind of develop this appreciation for a lot of the nuance and the stuff that is not blowing your palate out of the water. And I think that this quote unquote resurgence of lagers, or maybe it's a new surgence, is probably directly related to that. And I think a lot of the public that is starting to get on board with them, there's always the element of the cool factor with the beer geek crowd and the brewers crowd and the people who really take craft beer seriously. So if it falls into the cool category, you're going to get more people involved. But I also just think that people are genuinely coming back to some more drinkable versions of styles they love. As far as we've seen the uptick in the bar, I mean, Vim and Vigor was kind of a slow start, but it got a lot of attention in the first 2 months that we were open. And that attention kind of had us selling probably more outside the place than inside. But now it's a bit of a beast, I would say.
Yeah.
So we definitely produce a lot more volume of that beer than anything else. And when I say it was not really set out to be a flagship, I mean, I could produce twice the amount of beer in a year if I didn't produce this damn beer. But I love it. So
yeah, I was going to say that must be challenging because of the lagering process and the time it takes, and like stuck in something that you could be brewing another IPA with or whatever, and then you can't like overcharge for it either, because people aren't going to spend a ton of money on a Pilsner. I mean, some people would, but like, I understand you probably don't.
Well, I mean, it's really funny you bring that up, because when we first opened, Vim and Vigor was our most expensive beer coming out of the store, and people question it. They go, well, this is just a stupid lager. Why is it so expensive? And I'm like, well, we don't brew enough of it yet, so I got to spend, whatever, $800 on a yeast pitch per batch. The hops are actually, there's a ton of hops in this beer because the bitterness levels, the alpha acids in the hops themselves are so low. So that's an added expense. Right. Plus, it's sitting in the tank twice as long as anything else. So realistically, I should be charging even more, but I can't. Because nobody would ever even buy it. But it was just interesting that, I was like, well, it's just the most expensive beer we make, so there you go.
How did that one get so popular? like I was looking back. I was telling you over email that we were doing the clips. Like Dan, who works for us, was making the clips from our old episodes to start redoing it, and he was doing yours in Dominion City the other day. And we were reviewing it, so I hadn't seen it. I don't watch the podcast back ever, so I was looking at it, and you drank Vim Vigor, Scott had something else, and I had like the single hop IPA or something like that, or pale ale, I think. And I was like, God, why did I get Vim Vigor, man? Because I didn't give a shit about pilsners back then. All I cared about was haze. Because
Oh no, you guys thought I was right out of my mind.
Yeah, and now I'm. I thought you were bonkers.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and I could
oh
actually.
Man, I had so much fun that day.
Dude,
I still remember that day. It was great.
That was the night of the event, and the night before I met you accidentally with Sam at that baseball field event. We were just chatting.
Yeah, we met there, and then we ended up at the same after hours bar too.
Yeah, it was a fun
at 268 upstairs, and then I was with Kyle from Happy Goat Coffee.
Yes, of course. Yeah, the home.
And then he's like, "This is the dude interviewing you tomorrow," and I was like, "Oh, hey man."
It was a good. I never think. I don't know. I put you on blast, but you after the CBAs, actually after the event. So during the day, we probably were just being crazy people and asking you about haze. Who the fuck are these guys asking me about hazy beers? Right?
I might have even said that.
You probably did, and you were right to. I was looking back at these videos, like, dude, shut up. What is your problem? Like, I get it, haze. All right, fine. It's not that serious. But I remember at the night of the event. This is why I love the beer thing. Like, you know, obviously the brewing awards, there's buckets of beer at every single table, and you can just go crazy. Then they had the big table up the back with beers from all over the country, like Four Winds and like all from BC stuff. It was just crazy. You were trash. It was awesome. I think I saw that video of it. It was really good. I remember you came. I was telling Dan about. I was like, Matt just came up. He like lifted his shirt up. He's like, that guy. He's talking all like real smart stuff like that. Yeah, he was a wild man. it was beautiful. But the point was, I was kicking myself for not drinking Vim Vigor because ever since basically what Noah was saying, even a haze boy who I still very much love that stuff and all the trendy dumb things.
Of course,
I've come back to, and this is like, if I could drink nothing else, I would drink this all day, every day. Nothing else really matters to me. So I appreciate Vim Vigor on the level I didn't at the time. To Noah's point of that change, like where did the like the legend of that beer start? Like how did that sort of the growth of it? Obviously, it started highly and then got more and more sought after because as this got popular, it was already there, right? I'm sure it's slot in, but I'd be curious if it's a story.
It was a lot of chance. We opened the brew pub on Wednesday, September 16th in 2015.
Okay.
And that Saturday, there was a Brew Donkey tour coming through. So Brew Donkey is an Ottawa-based company that hosts tours to different breweries on Saturdays and Sundays and whenever.
Good dude.
And it was our first one. Oh, you met Brad, of course. And it was our first one since we had opened. I did some kind of a weird tour for people when we were under construction.
Right.
And in that tour happened to be Jordan St. John, who was writing for the Ontario Craft Beer Guide. And he kind of left the tour a little bit. And I think he was really just using Brad's bus to get from brewery to brewery to save some money on taxis and things like that. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to go, review your beers." And I'm sitting there going, "Man, I got like my first beers I've ever brewed on my own system here. Like this is not ideal here." I didn't think it was a great plan. And then he called me over after reviewing them and was extremely complimentary. And at that time, he was pretty into Pilsners. And, he went back to Toronto and told everybody about Vim Vigor. And so within 2 or 3 weeks of me opening, I had certain people asking me, the next time you come to Toronto, can you bring me some of this Pilsner? And then, it just got into some people's hands that really dug it, and they have, some form of influence and some really talented writers and things like that. And it was just a lot of luck. And I mean, the beer, the first batch of it was very good, so I was very happy about that. But I also spent, I went to brewing school, and out of brewing school, I got a job brewing lager for 3 years. And people say, "Well, why would you want to work at a brewery like that?" And I said, well, first of all, you take what job you get. And second of all, I remember when I was studying brewing, thinking if I could get a job learning how to brew clean lagers, then I can brew anything. Because the process and the meticulous nature with which you have to execute that process is very, very unforgiving. So why wouldn't you want that unforgiving process to be applied to your IPAs and your stouts and your, Belgian beers and things like that. So I figured if I could kind of master that a little bit, that, I should be able to brew anything the way that I wanted it to. And so I did have experience brewing Pilsner before I made my own. The brewmaster I worked for before, Phil DeFonso, taught me a great deal about what was important in a glass of beer, the things that you think about that the customer will never think about. It's kind of our job to sweat that stuff. And, the Czech Pilsner I was brewing was really nice, but I was really, really kind of gung-ho on wanting to do my own very kind of Americanized German style where we took the IBUs up a lot and we took the aroma and flavor hopping up a lot because I thought there was a lot of room to move there. And that's kind of how Vim Vigor was born.
Amazing. That's cool that's how the word spread. I love that. Sorry, Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something, Noah?
Oh, no, but I can.
Okay.
No, but like I think as much as there's luck there, I think at the time there weren't. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there were a lot of up and coming craft breweries that were doing a pils.
I don't remember.
Nobody was.
No.
Well,
yeah, exactly. You would see like a blonde ale or something like that, and on most part, most of them aren't even. It was always like the brewers like, okay, I'm just doing this to appease people who like blonde beer or something like that. I feel like there wasn't a lot of love in those beers, but you could tell with
you needed the
there was a
gateway
lot
beer.
of love there. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the first time I tried your... No, go on.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was saying the first beer I ever tried of yours was a... my father-in-law passed it to me. I guess he went by your place, and it was a Belgian double with like orange peel and spices or something.
Oh yeah, and raisins.
And exactly. And being from Quebec, I have had a lot of really good doubles, and I've had the Trappist doubles. I had it all, and like in my experience, Quebec kind of is good at that, and obviously the Belgians are good at that. So like anything I've ever had coming out of Ontario has always been kind of mediocre. And I wasn't super excited by doubles at the time anymore anyway. But then I had your beer, and it kind of blew my mind. I was like, I need more from this brewery. And then that's when I got my hands on Vim Vigor. And you had this Belgian Session Ale too that was phenomenal. And then a few other. Yeah, Stamina was so good. Mm-hmm. And a few others. And it was just like, it was just kind of a breath of fresh air. Because as much as I loved at the time, more aggressive beers, and not to say that yours aren't ever aggressive, but there was a certain, I don't know, subtlety and balance. And I guess it's just your approach, right? If you train to make, a beer that you can't make a mistake on taste right, then you're gonna apply that same logic to the rest of your portfolio, whether it's a coffee imperial stout or a Belgian beer or whatever. And it's always a pleasure to drink anything that you put out. So,
amazing! Thank you.
I promise I'll stop complimenting you for the rest.
Oh, just wait! Once these 10% beers kick in, it's gonna get messy. I just want to acknowledge Nate. Shouts to Nate, who was supposed to be here tonight. So I hope you're feeling good, bro. He just said Lupo Solitario is a fantastic series. First time I've ever seen a single hop Kellerpils. Yes, cheers to Nate. I just finished that, so I'm going to cheers Nate. Some water. Get some water up here, Nate. So, let's talk about Noah's beer, since we talked about this beer the whole time. The black is beautiful. Honestly, bro, like, there was only 3 breweries here in Quebec that did it, and I think it was less than 30 in Ontario. It's a cause is super close to our... You never met my girlfriend, Tiffany. My girlfriend, Tiffany's parents are from Jamaica.
No, we haven't met.
No, you haven't met her. She, unfortunately, wasn't there that weekend, but... obviously, for us, it's super close to home. It's something that's really important, and Nate got me your one, and it was phenomenal. It was definitely like one of the best I had, because it was that big 10%, just a classic fire imperial stout. I'd love to just hear about the beer itself and also sort of what inspired you to get involved in that particular program. And what's not the word? What would you call it?
Cause.
Initiative.
Initiative. That's the goddamn word.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the beer itself. I mean, it might actually make more sense to talk about getting into it and then talk about the beer because it kind of influenced the approach we took. You know, the shit was hitting the fan in the U.S. and the shit was hitting the fan in a different way, you know, where we live and everywhere in the world. So here we are, kind of starting to crawl a little bit out of our first lockdown. And you know, the first part of that business was great. People, you know, it was like the toilet paper syndrome. People thought that the world was going to run out of beer, so they bought it all up as fast as they could. And that was pretty cool. And then, you know, our particular brewery, and we can get into this later on because it's not that integral to the story, but we were not really, our business model is usually pretty awesome, but it was not really all that well set up to deal with what happened in the last year. And so, you know, pandemic's stressful on everybody. It's really hard. We're very, very nervous business owners, right? I think any business owner at that time is very nervous because you don't know when this thing's going to end. You don't know when you're going to be shut down and can't operate business. You know, if you factor in a brewery, you know, you're not talking about a couple of pennies that are invested here. So it's big stressful. And then the shit happened with George Floyd, and you know, we didn't know what to do. Tooth and Nail has never taken to social media to talk about any awards we got. We've never taken to social media to talk about any of the charities that we've given money to over the years and the programs that we've invested in those things. It's not really ever been a focus for us. And so all of a sudden we started receiving personal messages going, hey, you know, we're waiting to hear from you guys. And I'm going, what are you waiting to hear? You know, like I'm just like a brewer in Hindenburg in Ottawa who sits in the back toiling away all day. Like, what influence do I have? Like, why are you looking to me? And it was a really, really challenging time for us because it was the first time we ever kind of faced the fact that, you know, we're a business that people look at. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing to come to terms with. And, you know, we sent out a message to the public going, you know, thanks for bringing this up with us. We don't really know what to say here other than, you know, we're a couple of suburban white people who have just kind of found themselves wondering what the hell is going on here. And at that time, you know, Marcus had come out from Weathered Souls and had started this initiative. And so we went ahead and we made a bit of a statement, and we were very much looking at material, reading things, trying to understand what was going on from other people's perspectives, trying to put it into perspective for ourselves. And so this opportunity came along. We said, okay, well, here, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't have money to start throwing around here. But here's an opportunity to raise some money and put it into something that, you know, we would like to support. So we went ahead and brewed the beer. And for us, I mean, the beer itself was very important for us to not, I mean, when people think about Tooth and Nail at this point, they probably do think about a lot of the stuff that Noah's talked about. So I wasn't going to all of a sudden make some, you know, crazy pastry stout that had been, you know, infused with 1,000 ingredients. I thought, well, why don't we take this recipe? And I knew that the recipe that he had written was not going to work on my brewing equipment. Just we would have ended up with too much residual sugar, or just the way that it all worked.
Right.
And so we just adapted it for our system and brewed an American Imperial Stout for that, just the way that it was designed in the first place, without adding too many adjuncts and things like that. And then, funny enough, is the stout was brewed and ready for quite a while before it was released. And I probably won't go too in depth into this process because the people that we were discussing things with all had very valid reasons for this, but we actually were having a hard time to find a charity to donate the money to.
I heard that a lot.
We had brought it up with a number of it was really important for us to do something as local as possible for that. And unfortunately, those things didn't work out. There were some reasons that people felt uneasy about taking the money. So in the past, we've worked closely with sick children and with mental health. And so when we were going through a bunch of different resources, I think maybe I found a resource on Ren's page for Black Health Alliance, and then we just kind of started going that route, and that's where the money went.
The Black
which was the Black Health Alliance in Toronto.
It's not Helpline.
Well,
Healthline, you say? I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, Black Health Can would be their Twitter handle or their Instagram handle.
Cool.
And that money was then going to support, in fact, youth programs and helping families that were struggling with the pandemic, and in particular, mental health initiatives. So we were able to find something that resonated with the things that we supported in the past. And so that's where that went. And we were super thrilled with the way the beer came out. I mean, it wasn't a far cry from the Imperial Stouts we've made recipe-wise. There were a couple of softer elements that I was really into. And I think what I really, really loved about it was there was this major chocolate flavor that came out of it, almost like this molten chocolate flavor. And there was like nothing added to that, right? It's just barley malt and oats. Mm-hmm. And we gave it a healthy dose of Cascade hops. So we were really happy with the program. We're really happy with the beer itself. And still to this day, to be totally honest, kind of just our heads are just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, where's our place in this? What do we do? How do we do anything? And at the same time, as the pandemic has stretched on, like, we've just been very, very compromised as a business to get involved in anything at all, to be honest with you. So we'll be curious to see where this goes in the future, but we were certainly happy to be a part of it and, give ourselves a good shake and learn a little bit for ourselves to understand where we come from and the effect that we've had on Black culture our entire lives, whether it's my parents, their parents, myself, everybody, right? And it's pretty easy to live in a little suburban white neighborhood and become pretty enclosed in what's around you and the things that but it's a good time to learn about the things you don't know at this point.
That's it, man. If this is what it took for a lot of people to learn about it, again, it's not too late. It's that's really what this was all about. I saw more people learning from this than obviously this wasn't the first time this had happened in the States or anywhere else. So this was the most impactful one because there were more eyeballs on it because everyone was stuck at home or whatever, not doing what they wanted to do. So if it taught you something, it's a beautiful thing, and it moved you to actually get involved in, and that's really dope. I love it. I think it's cool, and it's interesting. Just as we were setting up before, I was talking to Tiff about it because they just launched the Weathered Souls version is now in Walmart's 300 Walmart stores.
I saw that,
which is crazy.
Yeah, so it's crazy, and they've got big endiles. Like I've seen the pictures of the endiles at Walmart.
That was the one. With
wow. That'll stir something up, in a positive way, I believe.
Yes,
I certainly have to believe.
I've seen a couple negative things about it, and I disagree with them. As a white dude, I'm going to shut my fucking mouth, but I don't think the criticisms of this program are totally valid. That I've seen, but I think overall, if it's getting people, thinking about it, and also the good thing, you can do this again. You don't have to. It wasn't like the all together with the other half was like the one time. This is something that can be done over and over. So if people are in a position to do it again and they're able to do that, then it's an ongoing thing, which I like to see. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing that we'll take out of this, and once again, I'm just kind of a middle-aged white guy as well. I should shut the fuck up, but I do believe that I believe and I hope and I do believe that this conversation will now officially be ongoing.
Yes, and particularly
exactly.
in the beer world as well, which is, as we all know, we were joking about earlier, it's extraordinarily white and male. So this is hopefully it just gets more people thinking when they look around their organization. It doesn't matter what industry they're in. Like you look around your organization and you're like, huh, everybody looks like me. That might not be if you're a white person, I wonder why that is. And it's hopefully it's painted a bit more of a picture to show people the value of having a diverse team for perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Understanding what other things could be bad, could be good that you're not even considering. It's definitely had as much as it was a genuine, huge tragedy. It had a hopefully it seems to be having some sort of a positive outcome, an impact on society. I saw his family today, George Floyd's family. They got awarded, I think it was $27 million or something from around. $27
million, yeah, and I do my best to really try and stay away from a lot of social media and forums because people just don't know how to do anything but spit hate all the time. And you see people being like, oh well, at least the family got $27 million, and I'm kind of like, fuck, I'm pretty sure they don't care.
No.
Like that doesn't solve anything. That doesn't put anything to rest. That does not bring their family member back. So really at the end of the day, like you just said, you should shut the fuck up. I should shut the fuck up. I think people in general should just start shutting the fuck up. If you've got something bad to say, say it in your house. You don't need to get on the internet and start blowing things up. It's just a terrible place to be sometimes.
I couldn't agree more. I've seen so many. I don't know why people have to go out of their way to say negative ass shit. It's just unnecessary. Okay, you didn't like that beer. Did you really have to comment on that? Like, let it go. Like, it's not that serious. And that's a trivial version that instead.
That stuff makes me laugh, though.
Yeah, that's funny because beer people seem to.
You didn't like my beer, but now you feel wronged because you didn't like the beer I made. Like, this is so weird, man. Like, so you don't like it.
Like, okay, give it 1 on Untapped, like you do. Don't like sours. 1. Like, okay, good for you.
That's it.
Yeah, people are wild.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of comments from a few folks here. My brother's in the building. Says, "Cheers, gents. G'day, mate." Nate
What's up,
is
Bradley?
saying, speaking of Matt's favorites, this is from Nate. Speaking of Matt's favorite styles to brew, I'd love to know if he lost a bet when Judas Kiss came out because it seemed like one of the least Matt styles Tooth and Nail has put out.
It's a great question. I did not lose a bet. No, I consciously made the decision to make the beer. Now, I think there are a lot of people who make a lot of assumptions about what I do and don't like. Probably because I can be quite vocal about things from time to time. But with Judas Kiss, I mean, the hazy style for me has been an interesting. It's a hazy pale, like it's a little lower in alcohol, it's 5.8% or whatever. And I think for me, it was like, okay, I like a lot of these beers. I think a lot of them are really poorly brewed. And I decided that there's this challenge there for me to kind of overcome this stigma I had about them, right? And the ones that I've had that I've enjoyed, I mean, they're just amazing drinking experiences. But the number one thing that I was not enjoying about the style of beer was 95% of them that I'd get halfway through the glass and I'd be like, I'm done. Like, it's like, I've got crazy hop burn going on in my throat, and there's a lot of sugar in here, and I don't really particularly like very sweet beers. So I said, can I take this idea? Can I do some research, figure out, first of all, why are we creating the haze? How are we creating the haze? What's the end goal here? And then produce something that I believe has got drinkability to it that is still crisp and refreshing at the end of it all. And so it was kind of more of a challenge to myself to just see how we could pull it off. And the first batch I liked, the second batch I hated, and now I'm pretty into the beer itself. But we brew it once or twice a year or something like that. I think I'm probably putting it in the brew schedule in the next month.
So you're a haze.
But yeah, I'm team lactose all the way, bro.
Hey, my man. I knew it. I knew I had faith in you. A couple more comments from Nate. He says, I felt the Tooth and Nail adaptation of the Black is Beautiful recipe was a great execution in the spirit of the original recipe. It was a great Imperial Stout, and good on you guys for responding to the feedback from the community. So that's dope. No, I love it, man. Do you want to go to the next beer? Because I guess we'd be 40.
Yeah.
I know Noah's like a little slower. So basically, Matt, do you want to tell people?
He's probably done.
Yeah, Noah's just crushing. He does this
Almost,
at 4 p.m.
actually.
every day. 4 p.m. every day, Noah sends us a photo of a 10% beer he's drinking. It's phenomenal. I usually
Not every day.
Most days.
Close.
Many days.
Many
Many
days.
days.
But you're up at like
Yeah.
5 a.m., so that's your like
Yes.
10 p.m.
Yes, that's my evening at
Yes.
that point, basically.
So I'm not
Well, I'll
judging.
start sending you the beers I'm drinking at 5 a.m. How's that, Noah?
Hey, I'd
That
love
works.
to see that. We need a group chat on Facebook, boys.
Yeah,
which
right.
one should we? I guess just the lightest ABV of the stouts.
Yeah, do you want to dive into the stouts?
Whatever you want to do, or do you want to go the
time?
whatever you want to do? We can do the saison if you want to do that first, and then we can do the stout. You tell me. You're in charge. You're
I mean, I'd
the
probably if we're gonna try all 6 that I sent, I'd probably try the saison first, and then just go into the stouts. It's gonna be pretty hard to come back after Fortissimo and enjoy a saison.
That's true. Should we do
Yeah.
that first? What's it called again?
Is that Valor?
Valor.
Valor,
Is it
yeah.
Oh,
Thank you so
man.
much.
I want to be at your guys' place.
Sorry, yes. So Noah filled in for Nate. So Noah doesn't have the exact same beers as us, but he does have your next one, Noah, I guess, is one of the ones we'll be drinking.
Cool.
Tell us about this.
You can always so Valor is super fun. I'm a massive Belgian beer fan. I know it's probably like the least popular style of beer out there these days. I do believe you'll see a resurgence at some point because the beers are so damn delicious and food friendly. And for Valor,
Yeah.
it was a really wicked experience. I had never brewed a saison before, even though saison DuPont is in my top 3 desert island beers.
Nice. Good memory.
And I think it was March of the first year we opened. So we've been open about 6 months.
Okay.
And I knew I wanted to do a saison, but I literally spent like a month reading every night about as much information as I could get about what a real saison, like how to brew them, because it's a pretty historical beer, right? And I'm not sitting out on a farm where I've just got spare spelt and all these different things kicking around. And it was the essay by Yvonne de Betz in the Farmhouse Ales book that really, really inspired me. So I took a lot of those tips and a lot of those ideas, and then we brewed Valor, and it wasn't like we didn't even have a label for it or whatever. And I just chucked it out to the Canadian Brewing Awards as a joke, and it won a gold medal.
Wow.
So super thrilled with it. It's had some ups and downs over the years, but overall, I'd say probably one of the most consistent beers that we've produced. And to me, it's everything about the saison style that I love. So you've got wheat, barley, oats, and rye in there. The rye kind of picks up on the hoppiness a little bit and the spiciness of the yeast, and we brew it to be like excessively dry. Nice. Very spritzy, very dry, and yet you get all these wonderful fruity aromatics off of it that comes through with a little bit of pepper and a little bit of spice on the background. So for like what is actually a bit of a complex grain bill and yeast fermentation, there's so much flavor, and yet it's just so insanely refreshing and drinkable for me.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I feel like I only took like a rather large heady sip there, so I'm going to go back to it. But is there a lot of like phenols, or like is that sort of banana-y thing happening? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, this yeast, we actually blend 2 different yeasts for this one in-house. And you're definitely going to produce some of those phenols coming out. But I do find they're in balance. Like, to me, when the phenolic nature of the beer starts to go over to like burnt plastic, burnt vinyl, that kind of like, there's definitely like a more Band-Aid-y type thing.
Yeah.
That's when you've kind of pushed it too far and you've kind of ruined it. This come across more to me as just like some pepper, some baking spice. And it's just a nice balance with just the huge fruity nose of it coming through.
Yeah, definitely getting that pepper. Go on, no.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say, Craig is not a fan of saisons, generally speaking.
No.
But I have a
he was trying to
feeling.
avoid it.
Yeah. I have a feeling and I'm not putting you on the spot, Craig, but I would have a feeling that you'd probably enjoy this one more than many
most?
others. I know you tend to like
Yeah.
the the oaked Brett saisons that where all those phenols are kind of eaten away and then you just have that dustiness left. But I feel like Valor, from what I remember, it's been a little while. It had like a slight peppery and slight spicy component to it,
Yeah.
but it drank more like saison DuPont than it did. A lot of people end up brewing these saisons that just taste like heavy cloves, like you're drinking like a Unibrew beer or something. But that's not really what Valor is. Valor just it's more of a subtlety and just a balance thing, like
That's
you
why
were
I was
saying.
casually asking about the phenols because I hadn't got them yet. That's just my main thing. Exactly what Noah said. Like the only way I describe it, I like the Hill Farmstead style of farmhouse ales, which are kind of that real softer, more delicate, almost that chewy body. This is not quite that as far as like it's a little higher ABV. I guess those ones are like the 5 mark. But this is like the peppery. I'm liking the spices here. It's not a banana bubblegum clove beverage like that. I
think some people kind of get it wrong in the brewing because early in the fermentation, this does have quite a bit of banana in there.
Okay.
And I think that one of the I don't like to use the word mistakes, but maybe one of the ways that people could improve their saisons is to understand that these yeasts work and work and work for an extended period of time. So just because your fermentation is over according to a hydrometer when the sugar's all been eaten, there's still a lot of activity going on in that beer. So some people will be like, okay, well, they'll turn a saison out in 2.5 or 3 weeks. And I think that they're really missing a lot of what happens in that 3 to 5 week period, as long as you keep the beer warm enough in the tank. The yeast contribute to mop things up like the big banana esters. They contribute a lot more spicy, a lot more complexity over time. And that was one of the things that I had read about and learned very, very early on, is a lot of the time it referred to the US brew pub problem, so to speak, as they put it when I read it, was that, you got to turn and burn these beers to keep your brew pub full of beer. And brew pubs in the States are, crazy busy. And so they were just like rotating through these saisons and calling them saisons, but not really giving them the respect that they need to allow them to breathe, allow the root to produce these really complex and wonderful flavors. And also just getting it bone dry is just so important. I mean, you have a whole bunch of sugar in this thing, and then that's when things just start falling apart. It needs to be lean.
Maybe that's what it was then. Maybe it's like the ones that are a little more rushed. And it doesn't surprise
Well, it's also
me
one of
that I
the.
like Go.
You don't have to like saison, by the way.
No, I'm not.
I mean, I might put you in a different category of friends, but
well, I don't hate it, and I know that now I understand the value of what you do. When I first met you, I didn't understand it. I wasn't ready for it. I was looking for something else than what you were doing. And whilst I appreciated and I enjoyed all the stuff that you had, I just wasn't. I was looking for that. Really, that's all I gave a fuck about for the longest time, because you just couldn't get here, and it's driving me crazy. And also, I couldn't leave. Could I leave then? No, I could leave. I got a visa. I was good.
You know what the funniest thing is?
Yeah.
When you guys came to my place to interview me, I think Scott went to the bar to grab the beers.
Okay.
And he came back. We were sitting by the tank in the back, you and I, and he came back and handed you your beer. And he's sitting there. He's got the beer and he's going, "See, check this shit out. It's clear." You guys were so blown away.
What is he doing?
That this was a clear beer. Like, what the hell? Where are we? What is this?
What did we sign up for?
And I just started laughing, man. I couldn't help myself.
And you should have laughed at us at the time. And to be fair, the podcast was like 2 years old. We didn't know shit, and we'd only been taking it serious for a short period.
Yeah, so, I wasn't laughing at that. I was laughing because you guys are entertaining as hell.
Oh. And you know what? That's all it was back then. It was as long as it was entertaining. Now it's kind of got a little nerdier. Because as I learned more by talking to smart motherfuckers like you two, I'm learning more and getting a more complex palate and stuff. Obviously, it's nearly 6 years now, so I really should know more about it. But yeah.
It's long journey, man. We got a lifetime.
That's it, bro. It's been fascinating. It's been really great, but it's cool to sort of like I feel like the lagers really spearheaded that. Like we're talking, not to bring it back again, but spearheaded that interest in more classic styles. And then as I got closer with Noah and Nate and dudes who also we've been drinking good beer for about the same time. And Noah, you were doing the blog when I started getting into beer. You were writing the blog, so you're solid 5 years ahead of me in the taking it seriously game. So it's been really fascinating to come back, and now I get what you do. I kept hearing everyone losing their minds over the pills and all the other stuff, and I felt like, oh, it's that good, eh? Like, okay, like I didn't know, and then when I tried it, Nate actually got me the 5th anniversary one. Like I had Vim Vigor since, and whenever I saw it at like Bar Hop, I always got it. I always enjoyed it. And I got the 5th anniversary one was amazing, and then now I'm appreciating these farmhouse, these saisons that prior to this, I probably wouldn't have even bothered. And I wasn't trying to skip it. I just thought we were trying to do the 4 stouts that are pretty intense. So I was like, oh, I wasn't sure if we were doing it. I'm more than happy to right now. But I'm genuinely
we can move on whenever you like.
Yeah, I feel like we'll get through as much of this as we can. And normally what we do, Noah's got a big guide at 750s, and I might have to clock that for tomorrow. But we can go through like half, and just so we can talk about them, because what you're actually doing with this, the pack is super dope. We'll get to that in a sec. As far as like the styles, like giving the context of back then in 2017 and not knowing much about it, we're just happy to be in Ottawa, and everyone was talking about Ottawa beer and stuff at the time. It was like you guys were just coming up as far as a city with a bunch of phenomenal breweries around the same time. I felt like it was like bam, bam. It's kind of like where Gatineau is now. Ottawa was like 4 years ago, I would argue. I don't know if that's fair, if either of you guys think that's fair.
Sure.
Yeah, makes sense.
I remember being very excited to be there, and it was very,
I don't know that Ottawa ever had the I don't know that Ottawa ever got the hype of the breweries in Gatineau. Like, I don't think that was the trajectory of us.
Right.
As a group of breweries. Like, I remember, because I moved back to Ottawa from Toronto, so I've got a lot of friends and connections, and I go to Toronto, and people are like, what's going on in Ottawa, man? I just keep hearing about Ottawa all the time. And I'm thinking, I don't know.
I just
got a bunch of breweries there, just like anywhere else. We're all kind of trying our hardest and stuff like that. But with the Gatineau thing, that's just like,
yeah, it's a different world. But I kind of like it. I don't know, because I hadn't thought about it until rewatching those clips. And that's what we were talking about, and a lot of them, aside from our obsession with haze, we were talking about the Ottawa area and how things were going crazy with you guys in Dominion. I can't remember who else though. Around the same time, was it like, I don't know, Bicycle was
in Ottawa, Beyond the Pale, maybe
Beyond the Pale.
Yeah, true, of course.
Yeah,
I think Bicycle was they were dropping the milkshake IPAs and stuff around that time as well.
Yeah, they got to be roughly the same age as us, Bicycle. I can't remember exactly when they opened, but everything kind of happened, within a couple of years.
I think that was kind of what it was. Go on, Neil.
I think one of the things was that at the time, probably if it was 2017, I think it kind of speaks to the challenges that you were having, Craig, with trying to find more fun contemporary styles that weren't quite as popular in Quebec yet. Like we had killer breweries. I mean, Dunham was huge at that point, Judicial obviously, but they weren't brewing milkshake IPAs and a lot of the haze wasn't. There were a few, but it wasn't as big. And then in the last 2 years, let's say, Quebec almost surpassed every other province in the country for fun IPAs and stuff like that. So I think at that time, Ottawa had Bicycle coming out with crazy stuff. Beyond the Pale was doing really well. And then you had what Matt was doing, which was kind of counterbalancing that. So it was really kind of up and coming. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what it was, but I didn't see the value of that balance at the time when I was looking in my backyard and couldn't find anything I really wanted. I go to Toronto all the time, so I could find most stuff there, and I felt like Ottawa was always kind of that place. It was sort of its own little world, and it was cooler to see that. That's why it's the same as Gatineau, like kind of exploding now. It's cool to see, I guess, all the just a lot of attention on a lot of things happening at one time that were exciting. I thought that was super dope. So when you opened, I know we're not going to. If anyone wants to hear the full story, I think you were episode 51 or 52 of the original podcast series. So if they want to hear the full story there, but Matt, when you opened, what were you trying to do with the brewery? Did you have specific styles that you were like, all right, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to do these well, or were you kind of?
I mean, I'm just trying to kind of remember. I remember that I had a very different approach. There was there was some direction. I knew that we were opening a pub, and that I needed to kind of make sure there was a little something for everybody. I grew up. So people probably always say grew up on this kind of beer. I don't mean grew up on it, but like when I got into craft beers, I was really heavy into American IPA for sure. And I really didn't want it to be like an IPA place. I didn't want to just have like one single kind of beer, right? And I did a lot of training. I did a lot of research. I was so passionate about studying beer, studying brewing, studying these things in the early days that I knew that I had a real, international influence. So that, I was as inspired by an English bitter as I was, a German alt beer as I was, an American IPA, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think when we opened the brewery, I knew I wanted to do the pills. I knew that we would do an IPA. I didn't really know what that looked like yet. And, I drank probably about 150,000 Sierra Nevadas opening up the brewery. So I knew we'd have a pale ale, something in that vein. And I think really the thing that I started brewing with was the idea of like, I'm going to keep this simple to begin with. I don't know how my equipment works yet. I don't want to try something big and dangerous that just gets dumped. I don't want to I don't want the learning curve of learning how to work in this brewery to be too steep. I've always had the philosophy of like walk before you run. And I'd often been very, very critical of some new brewers that would open up a new brewery while I was not a brewery owner and just a beer fan. And I'd be like, well, why the hell are you trying to do this crazy beer when you like just brew like 35 IBU hoppy pale ale and make it clean and start there and then get your chops and then kind of do all these other things. So I kind of approached it with that idea. And then people were really digging the beers I was making. And I was kind of thinking, I was kind of assuming that the public was going to think that those beers were pretty boring. But people took to them really quickly. And so I kind of said, well, okay, well, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel now. Let's kind of go down this path a little bit and see where we go. I mean, if you had asked me 3 years previous to opening Tooth and Nail, would I be making the beers that I'm making? I mean, maybe some version of it, but I think at the time I was considering a much more boisterous portfolio, so to speak. But now what I really like is in good times when, beers are turning over and we have people coming into the pub and beers going out the door and all this stuff. I like that you can come in and there's so many different styles of beer. And I don't really love the moniker that I've been given that I brew the classic styles, because I mean, you take a beer like Discretion, I mean, there's 13 different fruits and flowers and things like that in it. And that is something that I literally dreamed up with through a creative exercise to come up with. It doesn't match any styles. And we do a number of beers like that. It's just that I think that the idea that, if you want a great BJCP homebrewed, perfect, beer to follow the styles, go to Tooth and Nail. And I'd love to shape that kind of persona at some point, but I guess I kind of walked into it somewhat knowingly.
Yeah. I mean,
I think what ends up happening is that you unfortunately get either put in the bucket of like you're doing really trendy stuff or you're doing classic stuff, and those are the only two buckets that can now exist, which is obviously completely ridiculous. But yeah, because to your point, you from the beginning, as much as you brew well and clean and balanced, you do mess around. Like I would just that double that first beer I had from you. I was reading the ingredients list. It was like what was it? Orange peel, raisins, and spices.
Raisins and
If I'm
orange
not mistaken.
peel. Yeah.
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 Like that's
I mean,
obviously all those things are complementary, but they're not traditional. So
no.
yeah, like
I think,
that's an innovative and interesting thing.
One of my mentors that I worked for in San Diego, I was leaving my internship there, and he took me out, and we kind of had a lunch and a goodbye and all this stuff. And I asked him for some advice, and his whole thing was like, don't just choose an esoteric ingredient because you think it's cool. Go ahead and try to find the flavor attribute of that, and how that's going to work with the beer. Like, use it because it's going to lend something to that beer. Don't be like, oh, I'm gonna go out and put crickets in my beer because nobody's done that before. He's like, it's never like,
right.
It'll be good for that quick flash sale, but beyond that, it's not going to go anywhere. So I've always approached those things, and to me, like, I'm not a scientist. I've had brewers that are far, far more science oriented than I am, and they can talk circles around me. I failed all through science, all through high school. I actually had to go and take a university chemistry class just to get into brewing school. And I approach things much more from the art side of things. And to me, even if I'm going to brew a standard, golden ale, which I will never do, but if I were to do that, I would approach it, how creative can I get and how I'm going to put this thing together? Because brewing for me is probably one of the real only outlets that I have. And so recipe development, execution of process. I mean, for all of the beers we do, I can't think of a single beer that follows the same process as the other. Like, the processes are designed for that specific beer. Whether I'm using first wort hops, there has to be a reason to use first wort hops. If I'm dumping stuff in the whirlpool, there has to be a reason for that. If I'm skipping a certain step in the brewing process, because it's going to give that beer something that is special. So even in the most standard things, I still approach that from an extremely creative process. And if you're talking about lumping beers into either the hyper trendy stuff or the classic stuff, I'd like to see a bucket there for the creative stuff too.
Yeah, exactly.
The hardest part about that is right now I'm in a total creative slump, and you would think that the pandemic would have thrown me into this like creative like utopia, and it's the exact opposite. I'm finding myself very stunted, and I'd like to come up with a bunch of really new, interesting products for the summer, and I'm just banging my head against a wall right now. And I guess it'd be something akin to writer's block, but I think that creative element is actually at the end of the day what drives me to do what I do.
Interesting. Do you think it's maybe like a lack of
smoothies?
I was about to say smoothie sour collab. Let's go, Maddie. Let's get some exploding cans happening for the kids.
Oh, what's so funny though, like, because there's now this certain now there is a certain umbrella that Tooth and Nail as a brand falls under. So I can't just all of a sudden come out of left field with something like insanely wacky.
I mean, I guess not.
Small Pony did it.
That's true. And that
was tasty.
And that was wet. Yeah. It was different, eh?
Ridiculous question being with all this context now, like, how do you feel about, because I feel like the smoothie sours are the new haze, right? It's all controversial and people are getting furious about the exploding cans when really I don't think it's that much. I think people are boosting
their beer cocktails and not real beer, and then there's arguments about that. And so what's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I stay the fuck out of it, to be honest with you. I don't have the time or the energy to get involved in those discussions. The small pony smooth I thought was really tasty. Some of those beers and what I know of them don't make a lot of sense from a science point of view and a safety point of view in some regards, but I think that it's like anything. You're gonna have some burgeoning trend, and everybody is so hell bent on being the first to get there that you end up with so many terrible and in this particular case, and I never thought I'd say that, but almost dangerous situations. And then you get the people who take a step back and maybe they want to brew that kind of beer and they give it some thought and they give the process a thought and they figure out, how can I get fruit in there that's not going to make the can re-ferment and explode? And, you know, like, and then you start coming out with these versions that are interesting to drink. For me personally, I mean, my palate is just not a sugar-oriented palate. So while we do have some beers with high residual sugar, I think they're much drier than their counterparts from other people. So I never really get overly interested in it. You know, Instagram culture of craft beer these days is kind of pretty wild. And the way that people can really grab onto an actual photograph and make that beer their own. And now I only drink smoothies and all this stuff because I saw this really cool photo that had some strawberries in it and, you know, like all this stuff. So I think that's a really bizarre part of the industry right now. And it's not a part of the industry that I was like, that stuff didn't exist when I got passionate about brewing beer. So I don't know that I'm ever really going to get into any of that at this point. It doesn't drive me in any way. So I try to keep my mouth shut as much as possible and just let things happen. And what am I to do to tell somebody that they shouldn't like something? I mean, that's ridiculous. So as time goes on and I think I kind of mature a little bit and hopefully the ego can stay in check and I'll just put my head down and keep doing what I do.
That makes sense. I think it's also fascinating that just to come back to what you said before about being known as a traditional brewery, I wonder if it's just like you, only because you were so ahead of the game to begin with, that by the time this shit became cool, you were already doing exactly what everybody was looking for. And as I kind of thought it was because if brewers make the beers, brewers want to drink pilsners because they work these very laborious, 8 to 12 hour shifts for lifting heavy things and it's sweaty and blah, blah, blah. The last thing you want is a milkshake IPA. You want this nice, clean, light pilsner. And then they just keep probably taking that same innovation to keep making that beer better. Then they're delivering it. Then the same beer nerds who come to buy the haze are just seeing the brewers with this big foamy pour and they're like, oh, what the fuck is that? And it kind of like became this sort of little, it got momentum. It became this thing. And all of a sudden, you're sitting here, I've been doing this for 5 years, bro. Welcome. Catch up type of thing. And it's like,
well, 5 years is insane, right? Like what happened in 5 years? Like
what?
It's crazy.
So
like, 5 years is no amount of time. And yet the shit that's happened in 5 years, let alone 10 is nuts. But, I just had this conversation with someone the other day. And to your point, there are a lot of brewers that are very kind of like, I'm not the only guy out there trying to, just make clean balanced beers. I mean, you've got tons of different places, Suarez in New York, you've got Godspeed, you've got Four Winds, you've got, all these, I'm not going to start name dropping all over the place, but there is definitely a group of people who are more impassioned by that than the others. And I think at the end of the day, and I just had this conversation with somebody, is all of those people probably know who Michael Jackson is.
Yeah.
But I would say that there is probably a massive portion of brewers who got into the industry in the last 5 years that really have just heard the name and don't really know what he did for the brewing industry. And there may be a dividing line that comes with Michael Jackson's death where something kind of stopped and something picked up. And I don't know. I think there's certainly, like, when I got into brewing, I had to learn all this stuff. I couldn't just, I could play around on my home brewing kit and have some fun and stuff like that. But, learning the history of beer, learning the history of styles, educating yourself on why things came to be, allow you to understand how they now came to this. So I just think that that's an important part it's an important part of my learning experience. It doesn't have to be for everybody else, but I hope that the fact that history isn't necessarily being learned by everybody doesn't impact, I think we're going to pretty weird places right now. I don't know how much more weird we need to go. I still like beer. I still like beer to taste like beer at the end of the day.
Well, I think the fun thing is that as much as we're seeing things get like to a whole new level of wacky, you know what I mean? Like things were wacky 6, 7, 8 years ago, where all of a sudden people are brewing like 18% barley wine, like McKellar or whatever, or like just these insanely high alcohol beers, or shit like Utopias, or 1,000 IBUs and all this nonsense. Not nonsense, but like weird stuff that is just not balanced and not even that pleasant, to now going in a really sweet direction, and now with like smoothie seltzers, or just seltzers in general, or like things are moving like beyond beer. As much as there's that, I think we touched on this before, but I feel like there is this undercurrent of a repopularization, of, I'm not going to use the word classic, but repopularization of styles that in the last 5 years were not very popular. You know, I wouldn't surprise me if people start drinking Box again soon, and that becomes a thing.
Or Roos.
Like,
it's all about the Roos.
yeah, Roos.
Team Roos, boys. Team Roos.
But like and those types of beers are starting to excite me. Like my friend Alex at Champs Libres, he's been doing a lot of different types of lagers. He just did like an oaked Dunkel with a friend that owns an IGA. Like they brewed it together, and that's actually what was in this glass before. And it's freaking awesome. And anyway, all is to say, I think as much as things are kind of jumping the shark, it's not only that. You know what I mean? Like I feel like what's kind of interesting and fun is is that as far left, it's going back right at the same time. So and that's what I like, because I'm trying to put, not that I have an ego because I'm not a brewer, but I'm trying to put my ego aside too, and actually try and see if I do like that marshmallow infused smoothie, because brewing that to be palatable and not a complete disaster, I would imagine is a really challenging thing too, just a different type of challenge, and being able to appreciate that, while also equally being able to appreciate something that's much more refined and simple and straightforward, is kind of a fun direction at the same time.
Yes,
well, and at the end of the day, like, people can like what they like.
Yeah, exactly.
My request is that people make their own minds up about what they like. Because I think that would help.
Yeah. It was interesting what you were just saying before, Matt, about the brewers who might have just started brewing the last 5 years, not knowing the history of brewing. I kind of liken that as well. Like, I do music, I do rap music. I've been doing into it since the early 90s when I was a child, and like, so I studied the game and the ones that came up before, and then blah blah blah. Then all the kids now are just doing this trap and mumble rap stuff, and as the old man in rap who's been doing it forever, I'm looking at these kids like, what are you doing, you idiot? Like, it took me a while to get past to understand what they're doing, and because a lot of them don't give a flying fuck what happened in the 90s. Like, it doesn't matter to them. So I don't have those same hang-ups with beer, because I am the new kid, I guess, in that context, being 10 years or so into it, like taking it seriously. So I do get that, but I never, we were talking about, I think even Noah and a bunch of us recently, where if you think about beer drinkers who get into it the last few years, they wouldn't have had the same experience getting into beer as all of us did, where you start with, macro lagers, then you move to European lagers, then ambers or red ales, and then maybe a porter or a brown ale and a stout and an IPA, or English IPA, or an American IPA, then into the Belgians, and you go through this then into the trendy stuff, blah, blah, blah. These kids come straight into the game drinking 8%, triple dry hop New England IPAs and smoothie sours, and they don't know anything different. So it's sort of like this, it's such a strange world where a lot of people just didn't have that color wheel experience that we did. They'll go to somewhere like Massorum here in Montreal, where they just basically have stouts, crispies, and haze, and a few sours and stuff, and smoothies. Like, and that's all they know about beer. So I feel like it's such an interesting time to be into beer, and I guess that's probably why, coming back again, why maybe you stand out a little more, because you did stick to your guns and do this really well-made once again, not the traditional classic, whatever, but just really well made shit that never really followed the trend. You just did your own thing. It just happened to be that what you were making ended up becoming trendy. So you find yourself here. And then, I feel like, yeah, I agree with Noah that you could make something kind of wild. You did the haze. I remember when we met the first time, you said you had a collab with Great Lakes, and you were like, some hazy shit. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't do it. I just
remember that beer.
Yeah.
I like that beer.
I remember you dismissing
it
it initially, but I think it was in the tank, and you were dismissing the idea of it, not the beer itself, to be clear.
Right.
To be clear, get it?
Right.
But it's
Well, it was so funny, that collaboration, because Lackey and I approached it from that point of view, going, let's just do one of these silly beers. And now, look at Great Lakes' portfolio.
Yeah, it's basically all. I mean, look, to be fair, though, they were late on that. They took their time.
Oh, for sure.
And they decided,
They were allowed to be, though. They were making some pretty great IPAs.
Oh, yeah. And no one was mad, though, because, RoboHop and stuff like that, and Thrust and all that stuff were fire as they were, as American IPAs or West Coast IPAs. They didn't need to be hazed up, but that's the direction they chose to go. Plus, they're also, 30-plus year, veterans. They can do what the fuck they want, and everyone's going to love
That's
it. So
yeah.
that's cool.
I mean, at the end of the day, anybody can do what they want. I mean, look at Bim. I mean, Bim's doing Czech lagers now. Next year, who knows? Maybe he's just going to be doing. Well, I don't think those are going to stop, but he gets hell bent on something and doesn't care what people are looking for. I'm kind of maybe a little more in the middle.
I find it just an interesting thing. I haven't heard anyone say that before, and I really appreciate your candor on this one and just being like, look, I don't really know what to do for the summer. I think that's an interesting place to find yourself. And I imagine it would be difficult, because I don't think it's weird, actually, that maybe you haven't been super inspired, because I've heard a lot of creatives that I follow, whether they're visual artists or musicians or whatever, you think that we're all got all this time in the world, but it's tumultuous. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's negative things.
I think the lack of travel.
Yeah.
The lack of travel has really probably stunted a lot of it. A lot of my ideas come from, I've been fortunate enough to go to Europe 3 years in a row on beer trips and get exposed to just different ideas, right? Like, I'm not going to go to Belgium and taste, whatever the beer is and come in and just make that beer. It's just talking to people and just getting these ideas, and your head gets filled with ideas and different processes and different angles at attacking certain concepts. And then you come back and you're, invigorated to just go in and try something new. And that usually turns into something pretty special. So I think that even in music, in any art form, in anything where you're looking for that kind of inspiration, I mean, the inspiration's not really being thrown at us at the moment. So you got to dig pretty deep. And then, of course, trying to keep the business alive right now, has not exactly helped with the creative side of things. You're just really just trying to make sure that you can hire some people back, that you can get your tap room open, however compromised that is. Every dollar helps, and get through that. So I'm kind of just looking forward to looking forward, actually, and just, I think it'll start to come to me once the snow melts, or maybe skiing, or I don't know. When things come to me, that just happens. It just happens. And if I search too hard, it takes longer for it to happen.
It's gonna let the universe work its magic and just drop the ideas in there. I love it.
It usually does,
I love that, man. I think that's great. Speaking of great ideas, you want to
let's have a beer?
We'll move to this next one, because
Sure.
I love this pack. And then Noah, one of the things you're about to grab as part of this. Matt, do you want to
I'll go
us,
grab mine now.
Yeah, grab yours. Oh, yeah, real good. What's the first one we're going to do, bro?
Well, we should start small, right? And work up, and I can. Yeah, so we'll start with Fortitude Stout, which is
Fortitude.
That guy.
That bad boy.
My camera's a little bit slow here, but there you go.
No, I get it. Could you please grab Fortitude Stout? The lowest ABV. Thank you. So this is from a pack. Should we talk about the pack first?
Yeah. I mean, the pack. I had the idea for the pack in about January. It was pretty evident that things were going to be pretty tough this time of year still. Dana and I have never really been like a big St. Patrick's Day kind of people, but we have a bar that people like to come to on St. Patrick's Day. So the first year we had a couple of, maybe a stout and a porter on or something, and we put something in a cask. And then the next year it was just like this perfect storm. I had an imperial stout, a regular stout, and a bourbon barrel aged stout, and then a bourbon barrel aged stout that had been then further aged in Madeira barrels. So we said, well, why don't we do this stout extravaganza?
Okay.
And it's funny because it's like similar.
The episode.
Oh, is it?
I just randomly.
Yeah, right on.
Look at that. Great minds. Okay, so I keep going.
Similar in a way to like, what Dieu-du-Ciel does with Péché Day, but they're not variants of the same beer. It's a whole bunch of stouts. And it was really successful. I mean, we had all kinds of people come through the bar, very, very busy days, and some fun beers. And we did it again and again in various different iterations, because the beers were never planned for that day.
Right.
But this year we had the opportunity, because I knew a fresh batch of Fortitude was going to come out. We've never released Fornication in cans before. So Fornication is literally just a 50-50 blend of the Imperial Stout and Stout.
Okay.
And probably my favorite of them. So we got a label done for that and released that. And the Imperial Stout was timed right. And we still had a whole bunch of Fortissimo left in stainless from last year. And I said, well, we could can that, and then we could put together our Stout Extravaganza 4-pack that people can take home.
Is that what it's called?
So, no.
No.
I think I was too busy to come up with a name.
Sorry.
So you kind of get the. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just say it's Fortitude, Fortissimo. The one that's the blend of the two, and what was the fourth one?
Fortified. So this is a total
right.
nightmare when you're delivering kegs to bars, because you've got all these. They're all essentially the same name, right? So Fortitude was our stout, and the history of Fortitude. It was the first time I professionally brewed a stout, and it came out first in CO2, and then we nitrogenated it, and it's just a really nice stout. And then I wanted to do an imperial stout, and I said, well, there's enough coffee and chocolate in Fortitude in aroma and flavor wise. Why don't we amplify that and add some coffee and chocolate to it? And the brewer I was working with at the time, he was like, yeah, and you could just call it Fortified, right? Which that was the start of it all.
Perfect.
And then there was, when we put Fortified into bourbon barrels, I was really looking for a name that just meant big and loud. And so, through lots of Google searches and thesaurus searches and all this, I came across Fortissimo.
And what does that mean?
So Fortissimo, it's actually a musical connotation that means to hit loud, to play loud. Italian word from, I don't know if it's from operas or whatever the case was.
Okay.
And then we had the Fortissimo that we then pulled out of the bourbon barrel and put into the Madeira barrel. And I was like, how do you get louder than Fortissimo, right? So then I looked it up, and there actually is a musical connotation called Fortissimo.
I thought you'd made
So then I was like, what the heck? What have I done here, right? And then I tend to go to the taps a lot and try different blends. So I don't know if you saw, we released Vim and Valor this year in Magnums, but Vim and Valor started from just, if you blend them on tap together, like I think it's my favorite beer that you can have a tooth and nail. When you re-ferment it in the bottle, it really goes very strongly towards saison. Okay. But when you blend it on tap, it's like a hoppy saison. It's like it doesn't re-ferment in your glass, so you kind of really get this nice blend. And then I blended Fortified and Fortitude together, and I was like, well, now you've got Fornication, right? So that's the whole naming process, and it was just more for fun than anything. But then we were using Cold House at the time to deliver kegs, and man, like the wrong kegs going to the wrong bars, and drivers so pissed off at the names because they're all you look at the label, they all look the same. And it's just fun. So
I like that. This
is Fortitude.
Okay, cheers.
The original.
So this is like a nice.
Do you guys mind if I crack Fortissimo ahead of time?
We're gonna catch up.
Just make sure you siphon that,
eh? I think this is the next year after that.
Yeah. We might have had 2 years with some issues, but.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll let you know.
Talk about it when you're pouring. I'm going to run to the washroom real quick. But yeah, tell us about this beer specifically. I know we're going to get to it when we do it, but Noah, what year do you have?
I don't remember.
Does it
I
say?
think it might be
I don't.
not last year, but the year before. Is there any way of knowing?
No, I don't think I started putting dates until last year. You're probably
So
looking
then it
at
would be
the
the year
third
before.
edition. Yeah, probably the third one.
Because I wouldn't have kept it like
So, yeah.
too long because I didn't want the coffee to fade out. But it's probably about 2 years.
Yeah, I really find with the barrel aged beers, like I don't particularly love to age them. I think after about a year and a half or 2 years, you've lost a great deal of the actual barrel too. I find that really squashes down, almost like fruit in a fruit beer. Like I find they're better tasting when they're a bit younger.
And it's interesting too because some of them are just magic. Like there's something about Péché bourbon that like you can sit on that for a long time, and it still retains so much of what makes it great. It doesn't necessarily get better, but it changes a bit.
Yeah.
And I'd rather drink most of my beers fresher, but I just have too many of them. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, sure. I think
Just
Sale's releasing the bourbon as a pack this year, right?
Yeah, so they're not doing.
Are they
mixed.
releasing anything else, or just bourbon?
No, it's just. Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that way this year, but yeah, they're just releasing the bourbon, which kind of excites me because that's my favorite of all of them.
Right.
And all the depths already, all the stores already have them. They're just sitting on them. And then as of
until the 21st.
Is it the 21st? Then they're allowed.
Or 22nd, maybe, whatever it is.
Something like that. Yeah.
I know.
Okay, so
go on. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was just jumping in. Continue, please.
Yeah, no, I just haven't really talked about the beer at all. Fortitude. Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's actually it worked out really well for us as a brand now. With it being nitrogenated, I think there's an opportunity for more bars and restaurants to be excited to purchase it because there are really not a lot of nitrogenated stouts available in the craft beer landscape too.
Exactly.
And so it's gotten into more places and people then get to try it. And it's definitely got a really great following. I think I only ever brewed one single stout before this in my life. And sorry?
No shit, that's crazy.
Yeah, I approach brewing dark beers like very differently from pale beers. Like when you get into pale beers, I'm looking for the most simple. Like if I write a recipe and it's got 4 grains, I will sit there and try and figure out how I can make it 3 grains or 2. Because I find the simplicity of those brews actually creates a delicate complexity down the road. But with dark beers, these flavors are really, really intense. You've got, roasted barley and some variants of roasted barley. Like those are very intense and burned and acrid flavors. So you do need some layering of malts to support those flavors so that they come across as smooth and soft as opposed to very aggressive and acidic and all these different things. So, I think Fortitude itself has the most malt we use in a beer, and I think it's eight different malts, if I remember right. And just a very simple hopping schedule at the start of the boil. And I just really, really love, like I get different flavors off every sip every time I drink the beer, whether it's in a CO2 version in the can or nitro on tap is a very different beer. We've served them side by side, and they taste like 2 different beers, even though it's the exact same work, exact same fermentation out of the same tank. Really, really interesting exercise. I probably prefer the nitro version, but I've started to, because we haven't had a lot of it on tap in the last year, I've started drinking more of the canned CO2 version and have definitely created an appreciation for it as well.
Oh, I love that. Were you guys talking about nitro because of Nathan's comment, if you could see that here? Or did you not see that?
Mm-hmm.
You did?
I saw the word nitro. I didn't read the comment. I saw the word nitro, and I was like, I should talk about nitro.
Well, it's perfect, because he said Fortitude on nitro was one of my early tooth and nail loves. I remember having it in a flight the first time I visited years ago, still a local fave. And he said Vim and Valor was a revelation. I remember that was Nathan's New Year's Eve.
Awesome.
He was super stoked that he got the magnum of that one. And he drank it all to himself. He took that to the face like a G. I respect that. That's how the fuck
I
you
would have
do
too.
it. Yeah, man.
It's great.
That's super cool. I've always been curious actually about the naming convention, so I'm glad you went through that. But I think it's super cool that this was like pretty much the first stout you really ever built. You just built this whole, like, did it kind of progress in an order of not really ABV, but kind of that just got more and more intense over time, starting with the oatmeal stout and going from there? Or was it kind of like you went from this and you went to the big one, and you're like, oh, let's do a 7?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was more like that. It was, we had this, and I knew I wanted to do an imperial stout in the first year. I just didn't really know what that looked like yet. And then this kind of helped to influence and dictate. So there was the idea of the two beers being, cousins or some form of a series type thing. I just didn't know that it was going to go to where it went in terms of the different varieties and things like that. But when I blended the two to come up with the idea of Fornication, I was like, wow, that's really good. It's almost like too dry to be an export stout, not hoppy enough to be an American stout, but you've got the alcohol of both. And you'll see as you go through the 4 different stouts, you just build in intensity, but all the flavors are familiar. There's nothing that's going to jump out at you as being like, whoa, that's way different than the others, except for maybe when you get into the bourbon. But I like stouts to have a bit of heft. Like I like it to be rich. I like it to fill my mouth. I like it to be bold. I have no problem going to a pub that doesn't have, a lot of craft or smaller batch beers available, and I'll have a Guinness. But the problem with the Guinness is I always find I'm looking for more when I have it.
Yep.
Guinness is always clean. It's always enjoyable. It's inoffensive. I think it used to be much better 20, 25 years ago, but it's fine. But I'm always looking for more balls, so to speak, more just something. And so that's kind of, I approached Fortitude from that point of view. I guess I shouldn't have said that. I approached Fortitude from that point of view. And
I think it's fine.
And then the Imperial Stout came from there, and then everything else.
Gotcha. Noah, you were going to say?
I think that's one of the things I appreciated about your stouts from the start. And when breweries can nail a lower ABV stout, it always catches my eye because a lot of them just come, like, they taste fine, but they come off almost, for lack of a better term, like watery, or lack a certain richness. Now, when you say richness, and I assume what you mean is what I mean, where like it's not a sweetness, it's a body thing, it's a malt thing that
it's a mouth coating thing with a strong finish.
Like Everett from Hill Farmstead, like that beer is just insane. Like that, having that insane richness without the beer actually being rich, or having that mouthfeel and that complexity, but not being sweet. That's the kind of magic of a solid stout. And I think you do a good job of that, from Fortitude to all the Fs. Many Fs. Which I've been fortunate to have all of them, with the exception of the blend, I think. And I really enjoyed Fortissimo as well. That was a really interesting, very bizarre, like fun. That Madeira thing gave like a real port-like feel to it. So it had like an oxidized wine mixed in with the roastiness, and then the bourbon vanilla. It was so layered. I remember just sitting and enjoying that glass. Yeah. And
then there was
that was really good there.
There was a particular the Madeira barrel harbored, I guess, what is known as Decara, which is not far off Brett in its flavors. So there was a slight we found some counts when I sent it to the lab, and as it grew, there was just this underlying kind of funk thing on top of all the Madeira, on top of all of everything else that was layered in that beer, that I was really, really nervous about in the beginning, but over time it really played very well. So that was, a lot of the stuff that you do, you just get lucky. Like, I'm not gonna claim that was like an intentional thing that happened. It's just some beers you just get lucky.
Yeah, that was it's interesting that you say that, because I remember initially trying it and it being very much the bourbon barrel aged imperial stout with a real strong like sherry kind of vibe to it or whatever, and but no acidity, no funk. Um, and then actually, Craig, you were there that night. We had it. Remember the night we with at Derek's house
Yeah,
before COVID, right
I was
before
about to
COVID with
say,
all the
I'm checking
yeah, we
Untapped on my
cracked it,
login now. Yeah.
and it was a very different. This was you keeping in mind this was a night where we did a blind
I
goose
have a good idea
tasting
of what
of
happened.
like
Yeah.
15 different gooses
13.
mixed in with like double IPA, 13 mixed with double IPA. Blah, blah. This got popped towards the end of the night, so it's all
I don't
blurry.
remember
But
it at
I
all.
remember it being like, this isn't the beer I remember. This had like there was something had changed, and it was only a matter of less than a year, I think, in the bottle. It wasn't bad, but it was a very different beer. So it's interesting that you're talking about that Brett character that kind of like shifted a bit over time. Not Brett, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we, I'm a terrible planner, unfortunately, but I hope to plan to do some more interesting things like that in the future. A lot of those ideas, and even with a bunch of the other kind of small batch barrel stuff that we've done in the past, they're always just kind of a last minute, hey, I got this, why don't we do this? But it'd be good to be able to plan some stuff a little further ahead so that we can, work with those ideas, maybe recreate them, maybe do a better job.
Well, your winter.
It's also nice having time capsules.
What's the your holiday ale called?
Truce.
The quad. Yeah.
Yeah, Truce.
That particular edition of Truce was phenomenal as well. I think you only did it
again
once,
this
right?
year. We did it again this year. I wasn't quite as pleased with the result. It was still quite nice, but I don't know that the base beer going into the cognac barrel was as good as it had been in the past. Truce is a bitch. It's a very difficult beer to execute year in and year out. And we had the cognac barrel full. And so I decided against brewing it this year specifically and just releasing the cognac version. And we'll revisit it in the future, but it's that the beer's never presented us with anything but a boatload of challenges. So even though the results, year to year, I think the results have varied. There's a couple of years that I thought were really great. A couple of years I could have just, passed on. I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to those things. So thankfully people enjoyed the beers, right? That's at the end of the day, that should be the goal. I kind of got to keep that in mind sometimes, but we'll take a break from that for a little bit. We'll see what happens this year. I'm not sure. I would like to bring Sustenance back though, which is the beer you refer to with the raisins and the orange peel.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure we took a break from that. It's nice to take a break from these things. When you start getting into that annual rhythm of this is when we have to have this beer out and this beer out and this beer out, that also can stunt some creativity and you kind of get into the grind of that. And it's nice to evolve as well. So.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What style is the Truce? Is like the anniversary beer, but it's like a...
No, Truce is based on a Belgian quadruple idea, and then we add star anise and dried figs and raisins to it. So it takes on a much kind of sweeter, fruitier, rounder idea than a good quad is pretty lean and very complex with minimal ingredients, whereas this is like throwing a whole boatload of malts and different things at it, sugars. I don't know, the different kinds of sugars I've thrown in that beer over the years is mind-boggling.
That's amazing. What do you think, just all this talk about the double and then now the quad and stuff, based on that, this is what you do and stuff, what's your thoughts on the consumer appetite for these styles of beers as far as, not even in the context of the current trendy shit, like, people come to you for certain things. So even though they're coming to tooth and nail, maybe they're here for the Pilsner, the saison, the stouts, whatever, and then you've got these fantastic Belgian offerings. What's the general like who's buying that beer still? Who's talking about it? Who's excited about it? Like what's the?
Well, I mean, the Belgian stuff doesn't sell very well.
Okay.
It generally lingers on the shelf longer, which I don't mind because the beers are built for aging. They're built to last. And, I'd say that in Ottawa in particular, there's still probably that I don't like Hoegaarden, so I don't like Belgian beer kind of approach. I'd say a good chunk of what we sell Belgian-wise comes from over in Gatineau. French culture's just always been, associated with Belgians and Belgian beer, like Unibrew does great. Gigi Ciel's Belgian stuff sells well and things like that. So, and it's hard because, I always take the approach, like, should I educate people on what they should expect here? And like, that's kind of, I've been lucky enough that in the past that the brew pub could do that for me because people could order a taster, they could do this, and the bartender can chat up what makes that unique flavor and stuff like that. But if I could change anything, it's the idea that, like with dark beer, I don't like Guinness, I don't like dark beer. Well, that's ridiculous. Guinness is a very, very defined taste. It's a little bit flinty. It's not, certainly not for everybody, but you can't throw all dark beers under one umbrella. And I feel the same thing for Belgian ales. I mean, people will smell Valor and go, oh, it smells like a Hoegaarden. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's the Belgian yeast. You're going to get some similarities from beer to beer, but the beer itself tastes nothing like a Hoegaarden. And especially, like, I find it odd that, especially in this craze of sweeter, richer beers, like a Belgian double is probably just a style that people, for whatever reason, haven't gone ahead and tried yet, because I find it to be an extremely accessible flavor. There's really nice raisiny notes in there. There's a perception of sweetness, even though the beer is dry.
Yeah.
Very low bitterness, like all of these things that would appeal to a wider set of palates without being so distinct as like uber hoppy or uber boozy or all these things. I think if people given the chance, they would probably really enjoy the style. It's just a hurdle.
Interesting. So it's interesting you say that, because I always think of it as people are over it versus refusing to try it, because I'm probably just thinking of my own experience where I just kind of like lost interest. One beer that did get me back into Belgium, which I'd spoken about before, is Rodenbach. It just blew my fucking mind. And now I'm in love with Flanders Reds in a way I never thought I would be.
Sure.
So I am more open to trying it again, because I remember when back in the day the biggest thing in the world was the West Letteren 12, and I remember having that. It just was just the most mind-boggling thing, and the flavors were changing as every sip, and throughout the sip the flavors were changing. I don't even think to this day I've ever had anything that complex before. So I wonder if there's probably a both consumers, the newer folks that we were talking about earlier, who might not ever have gone through that Belgian phase, who are just used to haze and smoothies and crispy bars and shit, and then and pastries and the sweeter stuff, and then you'd probably maybe people more like us who went through it. You guys don't seem over it. I kind of got past it, and every time I've had it since, I've just kind of been, I don't want this. I'm just not interested.
Right.
But I am more open, I find now, to be like, I'm more open to be convinced of
I mean, the thing about Belgian beer is I think there's almost you almost need some kind of a desire to want to figure it out and to want to enjoy it. And there's not a lot of beer out there that's going to go as well with numerous amounts of different kinds of food than you're going to get with Belgian beer. So if the way that I kind of developed a taste was actually with Maudit and some aged versions of that with steak and things like this. And once I started actually having these things with food in the way that you would pair a wine with food, it really, really changed my whole concept of what I liked. And I definitely liked Belgian beer a lot when that happened. And I mean, you're also stuck in this thing where Belgian beer to many people is, an ankle, a double, a triple, and a saison, and a quadruple, and a wit. And those styles just kind of rule the roost. Well, I mean, you go to Belgium, and I mean, there's everything under the sun. And especially with some of the younger breweries now, employing hops for the first time in ways that haven't been done in decades or centuries. Very, very, Duranka, like one of my favorite breweries in the world. You throw a fresh XX bitter in my hand and I won't want to drink anything else for weeks. And I mean, that is a hoppy, bitter beer. It's great. So there's a lot under the surface that still needs to be discovered, but you kind of have to want to,
Do you reckon there's a possibility?
Yeah, I only recently discovered how special Durank really is. Like I'd had them in the past.
Unreal.
But recently one of the importers started getting them into the SAQ.
Yeah, they have the cuvee there.
They have a bunch. They have the cherry. They have the XX bitter. They have the cuvee. They have a few. And I got a little sampler to write about. And I guess it's one of those things where when you rediscover it, you're kind of just blown away by the quality of those beers and just the uniqueness of them. Like they had such a particular common profile between them all in a way that was different. Okay, whatever yeast profile they're using, or it was quite special. So yeah, you're right in the sense that like we think of all these those traditional style, and obviously we could talk about lambic for days. That's a whole other ball game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Belgian, like, lambic is always going to be lambic, and lambic's always going to have hype, and it's always going to be sought after, and it's going to be what it is because it's just such a thing of beauty. But I think the Trappist stuff had its time recently. That was like the popularity for the Trappist stuff was so intense, like 10 years ago, that I think people kind of got like Craig was saying, like enough is enough with the Trappist.
Over it.
Let's move on to other things. So I think it's probably I think it's slowly coming back. Like no one was brewing them for a while in Quebec. Quebec was like the place for it, but recently I'm seeing a lot of like kind of more contemporary version, like a bourbon barrel aged quad, or like what you did with Truce or whatever, and with the kind of resurgence of barley wine popularity too. I'm noticing quad popularity coming back. So I think it's just a matter of time until people are kind of getting back into the Trappist styles, maybe with more contemporary versions or stuff like that. But I kind of miss them a little bit. I wouldn't mind diving back into them. I'm getting tired of sweet stouts. I think I've drank enough sweet stouts to pack on enough pounds to last me a while.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on the sweet stouts. Should, Matt, in the interest of, I know we're probably looking to wrap up in about.
Yeah.
Should we just keep these going? We can wrap these afterwards.
Yeah. So go to Fornication next.
Fornication, please, babe. Thank you so much. I know.
Which is
Tiffany's enjoying the name. I'm like, can you grab Fornication?
Yeah.
So a new label for us, because we never canned this before, and like I'm really thrilled with the way the label came out. It's like there's a sensuality to the label itself that comes through in the beer, and this I don't know. There's something about this image that I can see us using for the business or the brewery going forward in some way.
That's cool.
Whether that's on a sweatshirt or I don't know, we'll see. But I love it.
Yeah.
Can you talk to the art, the different? Do you always use the same artist? Is it a group of artists? Is it one person?
I love talking about it. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I work with one artist, somebody I've known for a long time, who's actually very good friends with my younger brother growing up. And him and I, it's been a very interesting relationship. Before Tooth and Nail opened, I was kind of canvassing the ground, trying to think of who would do the art. I didn't even know what it would look like. And so, we met up a couple of times, and he would approach things from the point of view of like, don't worry about how this is going to look just yet. Let's talk about like, what do you like about brewing? What is it that drives you? What's your creative process? What's your vision for this brewery and the beers you make, but also the company, and we both kind of came up with this concept over 2 or 3 days that like we were both very, very inspired by classic things, and using the word classic in terms of meaning like would be relevant 100 years ago and will still be relevant 100 years from now. So timeless classic images, timeless classic visuals, emotions, values, all these things. Because to me, starting this brewery was like, well, if my kids want to take it over one day, I hope they do, and I'd love if Tooth and Nail was around in 100 years from now. So that was the basis for which we started. And then when we opened the brewery and we just kind of had some generic labels with some fonts and stuff, I said, okay, well, we didn't want to give the brewery itself a proper logo with an icon or anything because we didn't know how this thing lived and breathed yet. And it would be weird to pigeonhole yourself with an image when all of a sudden you're something really different. You know what I mean? And so the idea was to work with typeface and fonts and colors and imagery, and that's how we came up with the logo. And then when it came to the cans, he was going to potentially solicit various tattoo artists to do woodcut kind of images. And the woodcut images were kind of inspired by the way our pub looks. It's like a 100-year-old building with big beams and steel beams and wooden slats and things like that. And then he just threw me a couple of ideas one day. There was an idea for Bravado and for Valor and for Discretion. And I looked at this artwork and I was just like, I'm pretty sure deep in my mind, I knew that this is exactly everything I wanted this brand to look like. And so I said, can we actually use those, And he was like, yeah, totally. I said, well, do you have time? Do you want to take this on? And he loved doing them. So he was like, yeah, let's see where this goes. And that's just kind of the story of it. And it's really interesting when I come up with a beer now, I literally will give him everything. I'll be like, okay, this is why I was inspired to brew this beer. This is the color of the beer, the bitterness, the sweetness, the body, the alcohol. This is why I gave the beer this name, because the name will tie into the beer somehow. This is the whole concept. Go for it. And he comes back with things that are like so beyond what I would imagine. And like he nails it every time. Like I'll usually give him an idea. I'll be like, oh, I was thinking this and this, and he'll be like, pump the brakes there, Kimosabe. You don't, I believe he called one of my drawings naive one time, and I pretty much just shut it off.
Wow.
Wow.
It's like stick to the beer. Yeah. But we have such an awesome relationship. We're working on kind of a new project right now I'm pretty excited about. And he just, he's a really busy guy. He has a very, very intense job. And yet he's a full-on artist and graphic designer. And so this is his like outlet and he loves it. So
that's amazing.
We did an art show actually one day where there was the whole development of the logo, the development of the can look, the development of the pictures, all in these sequenced kind of books that we laid out on the table, and all the artwork on the wall is super, super cool. Cause there actually is like a really mega long, well thought out story that goes with it. So yeah.
Did you share those on social media?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
Because it sounds like what you're saying sounds familiar,
snippets.
but maybe like your description is making me create it in my mind, and it didn't happen. But it almost sounds like I feel like I saw it.
Yeah, maybe.
And yes, Tiff, I am selling you on cats.
Yes, she's already sold. We considered getting a cat. We were talking to Noah during the thing. We wanted to get a cat.
Is she a cat person?
Yeah, we're both cat and dog people. But we were like, well, we have a small apartment in the city. It's kind of mean to get a dog. And we back, in the before time.
Thank God you said that. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, like they're like, it just doesn't make, it's not nice for a dog, right? And we traveled a lot back, like in the before time. So I'm like,
yeah,
that's why I was hesitant to. We would try to adopt one, foster one. Do like the fostering thing, and they were so popular you couldn't get anything. This was probably early on, April, May last year, I imagine, and we couldn't get it. But Noah was going to share some resources because we wanted a cat that didn't shit. I don't want like fucking pet hair all over my stuff. But we've just got too much crap in the house. I'm just looking around, and there's so many places for it to hide and get stuck and to chew on cables. I'm like, it's not that kind of party around here, mate. Like,
Yeah, you don't really need to worry about that with cats, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Whole other conversation. So this beer is great. So this is 7.5%. Definitely, going from a 5.4, I think it was, to now 7.5. You can feel the difference in the mouth feel. It's a little roastier. The sweetness is ramped up a touch because that one was very dry. The other one starts super dry. This is still quite dry. What else am I missing? I'm getting a lot of chocolate. I feel like I'm getting a touch of coffee in this one too, potentially.
You'd be getting the coffee. Yeah. I mean, the first thing that I get on the nose is the coffee. There is coffee in this.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Well then. Yeah, well, the next beer that we're having, Fortified, is brewed with coffee and chocolate. So when you mix the two, you're getting a little bit of both worlds, right? So you'll see, now that you're pulling out a little more coffee and chocolate out of this, you get into the Imperial Stout, and it becomes really quite prominent. And then you go into the bourbon, and then that's a whole different story.
That's a series.
Yeah,
go, please.
Go ahead.
I was just looking at the. I know this is just my analness because I still do the reviews, obviously, hence the stupid photos. I've had Fortified before, so my Untapped tells me back in 2018, and it's a different variants because I noticed it on the Fortissimo, which we're going to have at the end. There's a Fortissimo 2020, which is here, but I guess the Fortified is the same. Like it's not technically like an annual beer where it would have the year next to it as such.
I mean, we've never really put the year on that beer.
Okay.
We have brewed it annually, but like not scheduled at the same time. It's nice to have it out before Christmas. I think the hard thing about Fortissimo is, and I'll talk about it a little more when we drink it, but I don't do a lot of contact time with the barrel for that beer.
Okay.
And so it's pretty tough in the middle of the summer rush to be brewing an Imperial Stout that's going to be released, in December.
6 months later.
And so the problem is that it always gets brewed like end of September or something like that. And then by the time Fortissimo is ready, it's like March. Well, if you have a nice warm March, it's not like barrel aged stouts are flying off the shelf as the weather's getting warmer. And so the timing of it's always been a little bit of a challenge. This year, I think we're going to do a little bit better. I actually will be putting the beer into bourbon barrels next week. And so we may look at kind of timing it a little bit differently that way because we'll be able to release that beer in the fall, which I think is pretty ideal.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, the Fortissimo 2020 that you see in the can, it was also on the bottle last year. That's the first time we put a date on any of them.
Okay, cool. I was actually going to ask about that because once again, I don't want to keep bringing up the old shit, but when I was watching the clips, I was looking at the B-roll of your fridge that I remember taking, and there was definitely a bottle. There were more bottles than cans at the time, and now it seems like you've gone kind of more to the short cans, which I love. I love that you do short cans. I'm such a huge fan of them. I very rarely would need more than the 330 or whatever it is of any given beer. I could drink 1,000 of the Pilsners if you need to, but if you only just want one of the 11.9% stouts, we know. That's all you really need. So I really appreciate that. So, what was the deal with the packaging? When did you guys move? Why did you guys move over to the cans?
Well, I'm not sure what you would have seen bottles wise at that time. We've only done a few. We've always from day one we were doing 12-ounce cans.
Interesting.
So you may have been there during a time because I think Strife was out then, and probably some Truce left over from the winter, and maybe even a Fortissimo at that point. So we do run into situations during a year where we may have 3 bottles in the fridge.
Maybe that's
bottling during the pandemic's been very, very not happening because just the nature of the bottle filler we have is very slow, and without all the labor that we needed to do it, it just made more sense to can some of our bottled stuff from a labor and time perspective.
Right.
But the short cans from day one, even before I opened the brewery, I said I'm doing short cans. It's just something I much prefer. I don't always necessarily want a large one. And, Ottawa's a pretty big outdoor city. Lots of people skiing, hiking, camping, cycling, all these things, and drinking beer from the can in, outdoor settings. And if you've got an 8.5% double IPA that somebody's drinking on a 30-degree day after cycling or whatever, and yes, that does happen, then, you know, by the bottom of that can, things are tasting pretty nasty. So it's kind of nice to just have the small can for the outdoor recreation purposes, the ease of transport, and just serving size. I mean, it's nice to, you know, people like trying a lot of different beers in a setting. And so it just gives that opportunity. But it was never a question. I was going with 12-ounce cans. And at the time too, like we've seen can shortages in the last couple of years that are a little scary for brewers. But at the time there were can shortages as well. But you were, you know, the conscious decision to go with 12 ounces, like nobody uses them, so they're not going to run out of them. Right now lots of people use them, and we did run into some shortages in the last couple of years. But yeah, at the end of the day, if it's something that I like it as a consumer, that's probably what we're going to end up selling.
I love that. I think that's important. Whenever the owner / brewer, the person in charge, is making those types of decisions about just shit that they like, whether it's the beers themselves, which obviously is extraordinarily important, because if the brewer is having to like, fine, I'll make this because the people want it, like, it doesn't always turn out the greatest. I think it's the brewers who make what they want, and then that's even cool. I never really thought about the value of having, you know, you being into short cans. I think that's super dope. Even Jeff Lopez right here saying, "Long live the short cans." Hell yeah, man!
Wicked.
They're just
Jeff,
like,
I mean, I've always been a consumer
works,
as well, right?
Yeah.
Jeff works at the company that you buy your printing from, I believe. It's a Montreal-based company, if I'm not. Perhaps,
like printing for labels.
I could be wrong. Yeah.
Our labels come
like
from Mississauga, so it would be.
Oh, maybe I've mistaken that. Please enlighten us, Jeff, if that's not the case.
Hi, Jeff.
But it's, hey, Jeff, thanks for coming through. But it's super cool. I feel like it's really become synonymous with your brand. They're just so iconic. Like you can just, you know, see them from a mile away, which is super dope. One random question. Oh, here you go. He said he works for Solucan.
Solucan, yeah. So our Vim and Vigor cans are coming from Solucan now. Yeah.
Nice. There you go.
And hopefully more brands coming into the summer. Yeah. Awesome.
That's great. Have you ever had beers in the LCBO in the past?
No. Any
particular reason why not? Because your good mates at Dominion had the same thing and they were pretty against it.
I definitely have been against it in the past. I don't know how against it I am right now, but I'm hoping that the world goes back to, you know, some semblance of what it was, and there's no way we would be able to keep up with the supply in that case. And I don't want to enter the LCBO and then get kicked out because, you know, 2 weeks in a row I was out of a beer that I was selling them and all this stuff. And I you know, most brewers would tell you the same thing. You know, there's a degree of which I'm a bit of a control freak, and when you start giving the control to somebody else, it's a scary thing for sure. I think that there are some people, you know, Bellwoods, for example, some other, you know, of my peers that have started selling the LCBO, and they've had an absolutely wonderful experience with it. And I think that through those anecdotes, you know, I'd probably be more open to it. It would be nice to get the beer a little further out sometimes, but at the same time, you know, we're in normal times, like we're pretty busy. We're selling the stuff we make, so finding another avenue. And to be honest with you, I'd be far more interested in a curated local store that curates a great selection of beer, that where the person selling it is very educated on my brand and everybody else's, and can really give the customer a great experience. I mean, for Dana and I, the customer experience trumps everything. And when we fuck that up, we take it pretty hard on ourselves too. So, I mean, the product is important. The experience is equally as important, if not more important. So by keeping those things under our own control for the time being, it just feels a little more genuine. It feels a little more manageable, I guess you could say.
That makes sense. Josh and Scott were saying that they liked not having that external pressure to deliver specific brands over and over at a certain volume, because that would have stopped their creativity as far as what they would have on their production schedule, really, when it comes down to it. Like,
I agree 100%.
Yeah, because then we can't do this and this now because we have to do a triple batch of this because the LCBO needs it. With that in mind,
and it might not happen all the time, but it will happen.
Right. Oh, exactly right. And then that's I can imagine. I very much aligned with that sort of like stifling nature of what that means. Although, excuse me, the brand awareness of having it in an LCB, obviously you're not really doing it for the money. It's more like getting people aware of it. And if somebody in Toronto is drinking a beer of yours that they found in the LCBO, luckily for you guys in Ontario, you have the online delivery, so people could just order a bunch. That would inspire them. Like, wow, this beer is fantastic. Oh, they've got like 10 more. Like, let me go get them. Whatever. So that's what the point of that customer journey would be. With that all in mind, hypothetically speaking, if you would or could easily put a beer in LCBO, which one of your beers do you think you would put?
Well, I mean, what I would choose and what would make sense would be two different things, probably.
How about the both answers?
I'd be a total idiot for it not to be Vim and Vigor.
Right.
I think Rabble Rouser IPA would be interesting for most people. Don't get to try that one. It's probably, right up there with Vim and Vigor as far as sales go at our place. Most people aren't really used to that kind of an IPA, which is, you've almost got New England flavors there with a really lean and crisp body. I think that people are initially kind of surprised that beer doesn't have boatloads of haze in it. That would be a fun one to do, but I mean, one beer we probably could do because it doesn't sell as well as I would like is Valor, and I mean Vim and Vigor and Valor to me are my two favorites. So I'd love to get Valor in a cork and caged bottle in the LCBO bottle condition to 4 volumes of CO2, and that would be like a self-fulfilling prophecy in some kind of ways there. But
that makes sense.
And I guess like not having an IPA means, if it sits there for a few months, you're not worried as much about it as long as it's stored well and cold
for a year. And
exactly.
I mean, all beers are going to lose some form of vibrancy over time, but at the same time, I mean, it holds up very, very well.
Yeah. That would be one concern. Like every time I go to Ontario, we always hit any LCBO, and I always find that it doesn't matter where, whether it's on the trip, on the drive up, or whatever. There's always, I feel like unless they're a store that has the walk-in fridge, there's always mishandling of styles that like basically New England IPAs on warm shelves. I see it all the time. It's disgraceful, and I feel like sometimes I'm not a snitch. But sometimes I feel like taking a picture and sending it to the brewery, going, look at these motherfuckers, look what they're doing to get shit here. Because I might have considered buying that beer, and I know better not to do that now because I'm checking can dates, and some of them are 6-8 months old for haze that I've seen in LCBOs and stuff. And
but I mean, you must be shopping at good dépanneurs then, because if you go to a lot of dépanneurs in Quebec, you're looking at like some seriously old beers in certain places too.
Yeah, that was the point I was just going to make, is that
same problem,
when you go to the LCBO, you're almost lucky. A lot of them now have those walk-in fridges, but yeah, like most depths in Montreal, like I think it's improving, but yeah, you see these shelf turds. Like a year-old IPA sitting in the shelf warm.
So really?
And I feel for the owners and I feel for the situation. I don't have a solution for it. Like they can't afford to just buy all this crazy refrigeration gear, but at the same time they're just not representing the products properly. So I don't have a solution for it. I don't know what the solution is, but it's not good. Being someone like us, we just know, right? We walk in, we're like, I ain't touching that.
Right.
I'm going into the fridge in the back, and I'm looking at the dates.
That's right.
But like for your everyday, even people who are somewhat knowledgeable might not even know that, right? Like you almost have to be like so into the scene that you just get it, and then you know what to buy and what not to buy. But yeah, like so many, and it does a disservice to the industry too, right? Because like you have this new person to beer that walks in, spends $7 on this IPA that's been sitting there for 6 months. They bring it home, they try it, it's complete garbage. Then they're like, well, back to Bud because this was a waste of my fucking time.
It's true.
So
true. It's
yeah,
awful.
it's challenging.
And back to C's point, when he's talking with Scott and Josh, and they're talking about, LCBO and stuff like that, remaining small as a producer has its pros and cons, obviously. But one of the pros is you can actually be a little bit picky as to who sells your beer. And, we spent the first couple of years, maybe not rightfully so, but like I started at one point where I wouldn't sell cans to a licensee because I was like, well, you buy, 96 cans of this beer. And then my Instagram pops up one day and someone's reviewing a beer that I know I haven't sold you anything in a year. Okay. And now you're selling this beer. Like, so it got to the point where I wasn't saying no to people, but I was like, I'll sell you a 2-4 at a time. And when that's out, I'll bring you another one, but don't stockpile any of this because there'll be 3 or 4 batches by the time you sell all of this that could have been fresh. Now, I think I've loosened up a little bit with that concept to a degree, but we're still very much like, you want to put my beer on tap, like I'm probably going to go drink at your bar before I say yes and make sure that the beers taste clean and that your lines are clean and that, we're fortunate in the sense that we don't have a ton of extra beer, and the beer that we have is sold by some pretty high profile beer bars that I trust and know and are friends. And I know that they're taking care of everything. And I know that their staff can talk to a customer about my product and all this stuff. But as you grow bigger and bigger, you have to loosen the reins on those controls. And that's where things can get scary because you're right, Noah. I mean, not everybody drinks craft beer and everyone's going to try one. And if the first 5 they taste are terrible, they're going to be like, you know what? I can rely on Bud tasting the same every time I have it. I'm just going to go back to that. Yep. So that's the scary part for us. It's so much cheaper. Yeah,
not worth it. I had to. We did a challenge video the other day where it was called Truth or Drink, and it was kind of like a riff off that Truth or Dab from the fucking what's it called? What's the thing called? Hot Ones. So we did a Hot Ones edition recently.
Oh, okay.
And then we did the Truth or Drink. So Tiff and I did that, and the whole point was that it had to have been. They asked some hard questions. He was like, we haven't posted it yet, but it was something like, who is the most annoying guest you've had on the podcast? We're like, obviously I'm not going to say, so you drink. So I had to buy some macro beers to, as a incentive. So
punishment.
As a punishment. So we bought Bud Light, and Coors Banquet. And I was genuinely, I don't know if excited was the word, but curious to try it because, my new love for Crispies and like appreciation. I was like, I've heard for some brewers that I very, very much respect say that if you go to St. Louis and you go to the Budweiser facility, like having the stuff like fresh is a revelation. It's apparently incredible. So, all right, I'm ready. I'm like, fuck. Honestly, it was like vomit inducing. I couldn't believe how bad the 3 of them were. Like sticky, malty corn, light, nothing messes. It was just so gross. So it always kind of like boggles my mind that people would go back.
I think once you cross over to craft beer, nobody goes back. Once you take that leap, once you develop that taste, and the good thing is a lot of the younger generation isn't even starting with a Bud, So I think there's a lot of hope there.
That's a good point too.
I hear think of that. Did either of you got like? I guess I only brought it kind of up because we're just talking about people like being like, oh, Bud's easier because it's more reliable, like maybe. But like, I find there's some craft beer friends or friends who like Scott, like my ex co-host, like good friend. I talk to him every single day. He's a huge friend. He just got busy with life and had kids and married and mowed lawns and had time for petty beer podcast. But I don't think not necessarily him, but his mates. They are craft drinkers, but they would definitely, if they were in a situation or instead of stocking up on something else, they would still get macro stuff. But they would, I would share beers with them back when you could share beers with people, and they would love the craft stuff as well. So I feel like there's still some people who are kind of straddling that line. Like I'm too much of a coffee snob. I only drink third wave, fancy single origin coffee and shit. You're not gonna find me at Tim Hortons or whatever second cup or Starbucks. But I can't do it. It's disgusting. And same as Budweiser and the macros. So I think some people don't mind straddling the line and can the caffeine's more important than the quality, so they'll still go and get a Tim Hortons. And I'm like, no, I can't do it.
I think it depends on the product.
I think you're right.
And how much you invested you are. Like, I can't do Tim Hortons, and I like you. I very much enjoyed their wave coffee, and when I have the funds, I buy high end stuff. But I can also kind of get by on okay coffee. It doesn't. Whereas with beer, it's different. And I think everyone has their thing. It's like how invested you are in that product or whatever. Like I used to be kind of a foodie, less so since I had kids. It just changed everything. But I can still eat craft dinner, and I still go to McDonald's. And I actually enjoy those two things, but I don't enjoy drinking Moosehead or I just won't. It's not that
it's a waste.
I just don't like it. I would just not drink beer at that point, or I would drink gin or something else. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I think it'd be the same if I went to a wedding and that's all they had or something. Thank fuck for COVID.
Just
I don't have to go to weddings ever again. But I can't stand them. But
gin is my wedding drink.
Yeah, man, gin is the move. Yeah, I think it's, and I think you're right, because I used to when we used to drive to Toronto, I was scummy and would drink. Worst case, if I had to, I wanted a coffee so bad, and worst case, I'd get Tim Hortons, and Tiff would be like, "What are you doing?" No,
it's pretty bad.
Yeah, I was a piece of shit for a little while, and then I caught up, and now I'm uber snob. Speaking of that, should we go to the next one, Matty?
Let's do it.
Is that
Fortified? We have Fortified, yeah.
Can you call Fortified? So Fortified is now, that was the blend with the first one, Fortitude, to make Fornication, which I love. Now I'm really understanding what's going on.
It's just hitting me now, but it would have been really interesting to just take 3 glasses and put them against each other and just see how those measure against each other.
I got a bit of each here as well. I'm gonna try them all. Yeah, go on, man.
Once you get into this one, it'll make the first one taste pretty light, pretty watery.
Yeah.
So this is 9.5. So I have had this before. This was coffee and chocolate. Okay, glorious. Ooh, look at this. This is a Stoutstravaganza, eh?
I remember when you first dropped that beer, and I was fortunate enough to try it. It rang to me like it was very Pesce like.
Oh, yeah?
And I don't remember if I asked you this at the time, or it was that an inspiration at all, or were you just trying to do your own thing, or because I know you have a love for Duel.
Yeah. I mean, Pesce. Somewhere in there, it's inspired by. I mean, whether that was a conscious decision or not. I mean, I've got so many incredible memories of sitting in that brew pub, cradling way too many glasses of this most perfect beer I'd ever had. And so for sure it's gotta be in there somewhere. Wasn't an attempt to make that beer for myself? No. I mean, I have attempted to make certain beers selfishly that other breweries make for myself. We did Hop Hugs in December this year, which was me trying to make a Sierra Nevada Celebration Ale because I couldn't go to the States for the first year and buy some because we just have it every Christmas. And so I was like, well, I've got all these whole cone hops, that I'm trying to find a use for. Let's try to actually recreate that beer. And this was not like that. I mean, this was taking Fortitude and trying to amplify it. But for sure there'd be, it's impossible. Your big inspirations are always going to come through in the things that you make. So
The hop.
But yeah,
I've actually
interestingly enough,
never
it's right
had
now a year
Celebration
ago.
Ale.
Oh no! Oh, I love it.
No, I've
But,
watched it from afar for so long, but I never had a chance to try it.
Yeah, same.
That'll be a huge letdown now.
It's gone too far, right? It's like an old school beer.
It's gone too far. That's it.
Yeah. Was this is a really dumb question and became a bit of an in joke, but was Hop Hugs a copper IPA? Was it like a copper kind of color?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely in the copper kind of darker red color. Wow.
Okay.
What's the
So it was like I remember Nate, because Nate's in Ottawa, and he
Oh yeah.
you know, he loves it. Sorry, let me fix my camera. The camera battery died. He got it, and he posted a picture of it, and I know I was just being a smart ass because like I knew it was your beer. I was like, yeah, well, Maddie's the fucking champion. Everything's got to be fire. But I'm like, oh, who wants a fucking copper beer? Who drinks copper beers? And like the team copper beer became like a thing, and it was just we're just giving shit about like copper beers because it just reminded me of like, hey.
Now I'm making a copper IPA for sure.
Yeah, you have to do it, honestly. And I'd love to collaborate on that and make it as copper and old school. I want no haze, crystal clear, just like 1997 UK Fuggle hops, maybe some Golding, East Kent, you know what I mean? Like as yawn as possible, as for the old boy in an English pub. Anyway.
For the old boys. Well, I mean, you're talking about Celebration Ale, which is from the 1980s, right? Like it was one of the, along with Liberty Ale, you're talking about the first IPAs produced in the United States. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they have held true to that concept. And I mean, I was trying to recreate that beer. So for sure, I mean, what do we call it? I called it Whole Cone Hop Hugs Classic American IPA, but I was going to call it Old School IPA. I mean, it was intentional for sure.
Right. Are you team copper?
But you'd be surprised at how some of those malt flavors actually can very much accentuate the hop flavors, right? Like we've gone completely the other side now, where if you throw any colored malts in an IPA, you're an idiot. But there's some sweetness that comes from those things if used properly that can make your hops taste absolutely delicious. But the beers don't they don't sit on the shelf very well, unfortunately. They fall apart pretty fast.
Yeah, I imagine, particularly with the whole cone hops as well, and they're very like extraordinarily seasonal.
They're delicate, and I mean we're actually consciously moving a number of beers over to a whole cone format. Yeah, I really like. There's some nuance there that is very, very different from pelletized hops. They're tricky to work with, but I'm putting together hopefully the ability to put a good chunk of whole cone hops into Vim and Vigor. Working with a farmer in the Hallertauer region of Germany, which is pretty special, and we've got a great relationship going. And I just asked him, do you pelletize everything you do? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, would you not pelletize some hops for me? And he was like so excited because like nobody asks for that. So, and I've maybe got some Czech saws coming that are in whole cone format. And then we're going to pursue the hop hugs thing a little bit more. So Tenacity, our pale ale, is now using about what would be not 100% whole cone, but getting pretty close. So, it's another thing that can make our beers taste a little more unique and super fun to explore. Tricky.
So
but...
pardon my ignorance on that, but do you mind breaking that down a little further? Like, I guess I had a misconception about why we pelletize. Is it pelletized hops? I always assumed it was because they were so perishable that you kind of needed to process them quickly, otherwise they spoil or whatever. But if what you're so are you saying, like, what do? They just dry them, or do they freeze them, or like how does that work?
So hops, there's a common misconception that if I'm using a term like whole cone hops or leaf hops, that they're like wet off the vine.
Okay.
And that's a wet hopped beer. I mean, that's a whole different thing. So when hops are taken off the vine during harvest, they are kiln dried to a certain degree of moisture, and then they pack them into these massive bales, right? They're like 60 kilogram bales of like compressed leaf whole cone hops. And then generally the majority of those these days in modern times will then get processed through a pelletizer. So that pelletizer, there are a couple of things there that are beneficial and some that aren't, but the storage ability of those hops is definitely better. They will store better.
Right.
A 20 kilogram bale of whole cone hops is really quite big, whereas a 20 kilogram box of pelletized hops is something like that. And so the storage of that becomes a very big factor, because if you're using all whole cone hops, you need like a building the size of my brewery just to house the hops, because they're that much bigger. Also, when you have a pelletized hop, it's run through the pelletizing process, so the lupulin glands have been ruptured, which then allows those oils to extract easier, potentially. And if you're dry hopping with something like that and it's pelletized properly, it will hit the beer at the top of the tank and disperse very quickly. So there are advantages to both. My experience so far is that the whole cone hops taste different. I could take, Amarillo whole cone, Amarillo pellets. There's a different flavor there. And some of the flavors that I've been experiencing with the whole cone ones are just unlike anything else. And they're more, you get a very saturated hop flavor that has a ton of delicate features. And that seems very, very, counterintuitive. But so far I like what I've gotten from them. But most brewers aren't asking for them, so they're not really being produced very much. So it's taken a little while to kind of find them and get a hold of them and stuff.
Do they, and again, I don't know a lot about this stuff, but when we were talking to the guys at Third Moon and stuff, they were talking about the different new products that exist, right? Like whether it's
incognito and
extracts or all that kind of stuff. And what they were explaining is that these newer products, what they allow for is less like vegetal components and certain flavors that they might not be looking for. Can you describe at all the difference? Is there a particular component about the non-pelletized hops that comes out, or is it just like it just tastes different, or is it like they're earthier, or is like
there's like definitely almost like a leafy component that you get, and it's not leafy.
Okay.
I mean, you can certainly extract a lot of vegetal flavors from a whole cone hop. You can do the same with pellets, and pellets are T90s, and now they make cryo hops, which are like removing even more of that material, and then you get extracts. And I mean, we use everything at Tooth and Nail, Like, I don't care what ingredients you use. I care what the beer tastes like at the end. How you get from A to B, it's not my business. And I'm not a purist from that point of view. We use extracts. I use tons of sugar in many of my beers. I use, different adjuncts here and there. Hop extracts, whole leaf hops, pelletized hops, cryo hops, T45 pellets. Like, as long as you're using it for a purpose, it's fine.
Right, exactly.
Some of the beers that we would be using the whole cone hops in, like the IPA is pushing it a little bit. I think that the dry hopping that was done on Hop Hugs with the whole leaf hops was almost started to go to the vegetal stage, like almost just a little too leafy. So if I brew it again, I'm going to pull back on the dry hops and actually just try and add more on the hot side, because you can still get a great deal of oils out on the hop side. Whether you're adding hops in a whirlpool, in a hop back, on the cold side, in the bright tank, whatever, you're always extracting a different flavor. So if I pack the hop back full of whole cone hops and run the beer through that on the way to the fermenter. Well, that gives me a different flavor than if I took those same hops and added it to my boil at the end of the boil. It gives me a different character than that same amount of hops on the cold side at whatever temperature I'm dry hopping at. So the fun is to try and extract these little nuances from your different parts of the process.
That's
so
amazing.
you know, I think it's really just something we're going to explore and play around with, and something I'm pretty inspired by right now. There's not a lot of people doing it. I think that I don't know what they're going to come up with after Incognito, but it might be the same thing as you have with beers, right? Like all of a sudden, maybe people are going to go back to whole cone hops because they've already explored every other avenue. I have no idea.
Right.
But I'm certainly pretty excited to explore it. They're a total bitch to brew with because our equipment now is designed for pelletized hops. It's not designed for throwing a bunch of flowers into your kettle. So the labor aspect of it is a little more intense, and it makes for a longer day. But it's like, why the hell not? I don't know.
Well,
I've enjoyed the beers we've done with them.
Freaking excited to try what you're doing. I want to be able to check out those different flavors, man.
I was gonna ask that. So say for Vim Vigor, because that's such a special beer, thank you, as it is. If you do introduce these whole cone hops, would it be a special edition of Vim Vigor, or would it just kind of become what it is, like what it is now?
No, I don't think, the special edition Vim and Vigor, like maybe we'll do that again sometime for a 10th anniversary or something like that. I'm not sure. No, I think I would just gradually bring them into the process a little bit at a time, evaluate that little bit. There are things as brewers, like that's my baby. So like I know every little tiny thing that is different from the previous batch that most people are never really going to recognize. And so I'd be able to bring them in slowly and see what effect that has, and bring them in a little bit more until we get, I have a goal for how much I want to use because of where I'm going to use those hops in the process. And so I'll probably start with a third of that, and then maybe try 2/3 of that, and hopefully get to 100%. But it's a bit of a gamble, because if this guy's doing this for me, like I got to purchase those, and then I got to use them, right? So if it's not going to work out, I'm kind of in trouble.
It's a dice roll.
I calculate these ideas,
Right.
So I'm not really worried about it. I think it'll be very, very cool. And it's not 100% that it's all going to work out either, but that's the goal at the moment.
If anyone can do it, it's you, sir. It really is.
Yeah, man.
I don't know if I really talked about this beer. This is like fantastic, and I just did while we were talking. I've still got just a little touch of each of them left. So I was trying the Fortitude, the Fornication, and this, and you can really see that. It's almost like a slow build. It's like almost like 2%. It's like 5, 4, 7, 5, 9, 5. It's around that 2% ramp up each time, and I'm like, okay, I can see the difference between these beers.
Pick your buzz.
Yeah, basically pick your buzz. And Noah, you nailed it.
And the coffee too is huge.
This is so Péché in the best possible way. I genuinely appreciate that, because it's coming up to Péché Day actually. Do you know they're not doing the obviously not the event, but they're not making any of the other beers this year. They're not even doing the 4-pack.
Yeah, that's actually what we were talking about. Yeah. This is just going to be bourbon this year. Yeah.
I was pretty devastated last year, because last year was the first year, like we were going to host it at Tooth and Nail in Ottawa. So we were going to be the Ottawa destination. And it was the first year we were going to do it. And it was just so amazing to be accepted into that, group of brewers that were offering it, and beer bars and things like that. And then shit.
It's the worst,
out,
man.
But,
it's one of my favorite days of the year.
I'd imagine next year they'll get it back on.
I feel like I remember when they changed it, because I'm actually like 4 blocks away less than to the brew pub, just up there. And all right, very convenient. Yeah, that's how you choose where you live. And so we always went every year. Even not last year, the year before, we went to the brunch in St. Jerome. We even bothered to go out there for that whole brunch where they actually served every single one, like in little small tasters, 2-3 ounces, whatever it was, through the food. It was exceptional. It's the greatest. What was my motherfucking point? Oh yeah, and I remember it was like about this time last year, and they had it booked in, And then they're like, oh, it's okay. It's going to be like April 25th. Like, oh, guys, I don't know. This lockdown seems a little real. And here we are, 12 months later.
We went through all of that.
Yeah.
We ended up selling our Péché beers in September on our patio. So the only thing we had open was this patio. But our patio, because of distancing rules, like we can put 12 bums out there. So it's not exactly great, right? So then I've got all these like insanely elaborate, expensive, and really cool kegs of Imperial Stout I'm sitting on. So we called it like Péché Weeks. So we knew it would probably, with the volume of people we could bring through on our patio, which was very much nothing, we figured it would take about 2 weeks to go through all 6, and it literally to the day took 2 weeks to go through all 6.
Okay, so you got.
But it was cool. People got to try them, and it was nice to be able to actually get. I don't like to say the word "get rid of them," but I didn't really want to sit on those beers for much longer. In terms of draft kegs and stuff like that. So, but it was fun. Yeah, the beers were great, man. The Mexican chocolate one I thought was pretty cool.
That was one of the best they've done.
Wasn't it? Was that in the pack?
Yeah, it was. It was in last year's pack.
Okay,
it's freaking great.
Okay.
Oh, and the single origin one I loved as well. I mean, the bourbon
that was
obviously fantastic, but the single origin I loved.
Yeah, it's super.
So yeah, hopefully put that back together soon enough.
Yeah, right. Have you ever done anything like that with any of these stout series? Because I kind of feel like these are ripe for some sort of creative,
just variants. I mean, they're all afterthoughts, unfortunately. Like it's always like, running around like just trying to like get all the beers done, make sure everybody's doing okay, make sure all the beers are tasting good, and then we'll release the stouts or something and go, shit, we should have done this, why didn't we think of this? And right before the pandemic we bought a pilot brewing system that's pretty fun. Like it's a pretty good pilot brewing system. And we had this idea because we're not known for IPAs. So the idea was, let's buy this pilot brewing system and let's release a brand new IPA every week in the pub. So it can be anything, session IPA, Belgian, English, like whatever you fruited, it doesn't matter. It was going to give us our opportunity to fly the freak flag and have a lot of fun with it. And so we were going to do IPA day every Tuesday or Thursday or something. And we're probably going to fill about 30 crowlers that would go on sale right at 6:00, and you could collect them or do whatever you want with them and all this stuff. And then literally like the week we were going to start brewing, we shut down. So it's literally just been sitting there. But these tanks would give us the opportunity to and this 4-pack was going to be a 6-pack.
Okay.
But then it just became too much in terms of like, first of all, it became too much like Péché Day in some ways. And second of all, it was just kind of like, I think starting with a 4-pack of the things that we know are good and going to work and be comfortable with. So we decided against the 6-pack, but we've also got Steadfast Porter, could have been part of the 6-pack, but we just decided to run with the 4-pack. It's, we're playing it safe, unfortunately, these days. So there you go.
I respect it, man. There's a lot more
understandable.
Right now than just, putting this out. The fact that you even still were able to do it for St. Patrick's Day, which is, when is that? The 17th, isn't it usually? Or is it just next weekend?
How fast did that winter go by?
Fuck, it's beautiful because winter sucks all the ball sacks, and this is glorious because no one went fucking anywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like today, like I was saying, I had the door open, like because it was just so hot, and the heater won't turn off in this place, so I'm like hot as shit. It's glorious. I love it. I feel like because we were talking about it the other day, it feels like because of the lack of cars on the road and the lack of planes in the sky, we're getting, for the first time, I've been in Canada just about 10.5 years, and this is the first time that the seasons have matched what's the solstices. Like winter didn't.
It's the first time I've seen it in a long time.
You too, you guys too, eh? That's what Tiff was saying. Okay.
I noticed it this year more than any other year. I'm like, this is what it's supposed to be like in March.
Yes, and even like the fall. I actually take it back to the fall. We got fall weather when fall was supposed to come, and fall didn't last 3 weeks. It lasted the almost full 3 months. You know,
That's
where it was
right.
like a slow grind with the leaves, and like you could actually wear your fall jacket for more than 2 weeks and kind of look fly and stuff.
That's right.
You know, after you've had the summer of wearing shorts, you actually get to wear hoodies and pants and your boots and you look, you know, whatever. Even though there wasn't anywhere to go, but if you felt like going for a walk, you felt nice about yourself. And then now the winter seems to have, you know, at least here in Montreal, you guys actually, it's funny enough, we get similar weather. Ottawa and Montreal, basically the same thing.
That's right.
Vermont. Whereas Toronto, those fucking softies always, my brother's always telling me like, hey, it's 10 degrees. I'm going for a BMX ride today, and it's fucking minus 12 here. I'm like, prick.
Oh yeah, there's snowbanks up to your head, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Everywhere, right? Where I feel like we're starting to get that. So I guess it's a pleasant side effect of all of this craziness that's happening in the world. You know, it's a nice side effect. And
I've always found March and April to be frustrating. And especially April, because you know, like 2 years ago, and I know this because we anyways, it's such a long story, it's not worth getting into, but we were finally going to be able to open a patio at Tooth and Nail. And I mean, I swear to God, that winter went to like May 15th, you know, and you're just like, and then it was just rain for a month.
Yep.
And we're just like, what's going on here? Like, this isn't even right. Like, this is way out of whack. But this year I feel like, you know what? You should have a couple of 10-degree days in March, and then it should dip down to 0 and you get a little bit of snow here and there. But like, things are warming up normally, and I think that April is going to be great, which we all deserve more than this
3 months of summer.
Like we just need to start getting outside and
getting our minds.
I've been fortunate enough to ski every weekend this winter, so like my mental health is good for
that's
that.
great.
But like, oh yeah, it's been great. But
With the kids?
yeah, we all need to get outside. Yeah, they're in lessons now and learning for the first time.
That's cool.
It's pretty exciting. Very cool.
I wish I liked winter sports.
Yeah, we needed it. We were, you know, like like anybody, you know, like it's been a hard year, and I'm not gonna cry about, you know, how hard my year was, because everyone's had a hard year, and in different ways we've been affected in different ways. But like, it became very important to try to stay sane a little bit, and I knew right from the get-go that being outside in the shittiest of winter months is the only way to somehow stay sane. So yeah, it was good. Good winter.
I respect that. I
Onward.
Like, yeah, man, it's the only way, and it makes me very happy that the breweries. I was telling someone the other day, I couldn't think of a single one that went under. I know it hasn't been easy, but I feel like it's forced every single human being, regardless of your industry, but particularly in beer, to be creative and to figure out how to make it work.
And some people are in better positions than others going in too, right?
Sure.
Like if you look at Bellwoods, like how perfect, like they had the LCBO releases time before the pandemic hit, but how perfect was it that timed up so great for them, right? And then all of a sudden
they already had a pretty good
to,
online presence.
For sure. But I mean, they're able to produce quite a bit of beer. So like, they're definitely, you know, some people were in positions that were better than others. For us, I think the biggest challenge was like our whole business was built around the people coming into our place. And I've talked to a lot of brew pub owners who feel the same way. And then to just up and, you know, excuse the term, pivot and just decide you're going to reinvent your business when in a month from now, you don't know, you may be just open again normally, and you now invested these $50,000 into changing how your business works and stuff. It's very challenging to constantly be trying to change something when you don't know what's coming at you. And, you know, we're open and close. I have employees that were laid off 3 different times in the last year. Right. So it's like, it's that worked against us for sure. But at the same time, we're pretty grateful that we were able to sell beer through the lockdowns. Pretty grateful that we can, you know, still pay rent and keep the place going and make beer and all this stuff, because it hasn't been so lucky for some other people.
No, you gotta acknowledge that too, which is super fortunate. And I was never sure that, because I thought, well, so many people are going to be, you know, having, you know, maybe temporarily lost their jobs and their income, and I thought, maybe people aren't going to buy beer as much, but it feels like it's one of the few industries that has kicked on where, like, I feel like people ramped up their beer budget because they had less other things to spend it on. You know? People
definitely still bought beer for sure. The winter was hard. And I haven't talked to another brewer who really did not see it just drop off a cliff. Except, I haven't talked to Dominion at all, but those guys put on a clinic on how to run a brewery during a pandemic. Like, it's so absolutely incredible to see what they have done. Yeah. Unbelievable. And they were, in the position where they could do that. I think Noah can probably attest to like how things get complicated when you've got two very little kids at home who are now not in school and you're running a business with your wife, who now has to be at home with the kids on a computer all day. Right. So it's like everybody's situation is different. And I was just so happy to see those guys take the opportunities where they could, because they just took it and ran with it. It was amazing.
Yeah. It was very
good on them.
The boys at the boys at Third Moon were telling me that they were like, fuck, man, like, they're like, everyone told us, because they opened same day as Saint-Guillaume Baron, in, I believe it was May.
Oh, no way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, both of them opened the exact same day, so they're kind of like, little twins. And, but like, I'm not sure about Jacob. I talk to him pretty regularly, but I haven't asked him, but Steve and Chris at Third Moon were saying that, like, everyone said it's about to be a shit show in January, February. It goes, we can't even think straight. Everything is bonkers. So I think everybody had their different sort of situations. I think for them, because they're doing the type of beers that they're doing, that's got the interest, Well,
I mean, they're the ultimate hype brewery at the moment, right? So like, if you end up in that position where you can ride that, like, ride it, man. Like,
the shit out of it.
Is amazing. Yeah, I'm very grateful for anybody who was able to, overcome this thing without significant, hardships, for sure. I mean, we aren't necessarily, like, we did fine. I don't think we excelled in sales by any means. We did fine. And I'm grateful enough for that. But the people who were able to take that thing and run with it, like, good on them, man.
Definitely fewer and further between, but yeah.
Sure.
Did you want to grab the last one and then we can wrap her up?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I definitely want to have the last one. I've been waiting like
you've been waiting for me
to get. So
hey man, I know it's only been 3 hours. We need to catch up to Noah. I'm gonna go grab it. Do you want to start talking about it, and maybe Noah, you can give some of your thoughts, because I know we didn't touch on your thoughts on this when you've been drinking it the last fucking hour.
How was it?
Yeah, for sure. It's good. It's still drinking good. The coffee is pretty much completely gone, but I do find sometimes that when it's interesting that you were mentioning that you find the barrel falls off, but sometimes I find it also age can like amp up the barrel, or at least like amp up the doughy kind of vanilla thing that you can get from a bourbon barrel.
Yeah,
so
like
it's
that.
definitely
I like that term,
like
doughy. I definitely get that.
Yeah. It's quite bourbon focused, very little coffee, but it's aged quite nicely.
Yeah, I've often found the coffee's the first thing to go, and if ever we were to do variants on this, I would do a cold steep of coffee after it came out of the barrel to try and get that back in there. Because even when it's first released, I can get the coffee, but it's so much more subtle than it is before it goes in the barrel.
And again, I don't know anything about brewing, but I've been noticing more and more recently that the way that people process the coffee, infuse the coffee into the beer, can just make such a big difference, whether you're doing cold or not. And then obviously, like, the huge range of types of coffee, it can completely transform a beer. Like, I've had a few from not Third Moon, but Saint-Guillaume Baron, and I feel like they're doing some really interesting stuff with coffee. Like, it's really coming out with these insane chocolatey notes that you don't normally get.
Definitely the coffee itself. I mean, it was actually, I'll wait till C gets his headphones on there, but it was actually Kyle from Happy Go Coffee who used to work there. Him and I chose the coffee for this based on the flavors of the coffee and the flavors of the beer. So I only use the same coffee every year for it.
Was it Happy Goat?
And it is Happy Goat, yeah.
Do you know he doesn't work there anymore?
Robust and chocolatey coffee. Oh, I know, yeah. I haven't seen him in years.
He's at Arlington 5 now.
Oh, is he?
I went and saw him last year. Yeah, he's doing good there. He's like the coffee manager.
Good.
He's killing the game. It's good.
Yeah, such a great guy, man. He was good to us for sure.
Yeah, good kid.
And but we selected the coffee together based on what we thought needed to get into this beer. But yeah, you change that coffee, the beer is going to change immensely.
Right.
And if you use shitty generic coffee, it's not going to be a good beer.
No, it has to be this. What was the coffee that you did use from Happy Goat?
Oh, this is it's pea berry from. Oh God, I've got it in my phone somewhere.
It's okay.
I'm just gonna run to the bathroom.
Wash your hands, eh? Wash your hands,
I'll tell you
filthy animal.
very quickly here.
No, you're right.
Yeah, seriously,
Oh. This fucking smells amazing, dude. Oof.
What do we use here? This is Brazilian.
Brazilian, okay. Yeah, Kyle
Brazilian pea berry Videra.
So I'm not surprised that makes me extra. I'm gonna hit him up. I haven't spoken to him for a little while, but he got the photo. There we go. Yeah, he had this like knack for really understanding tasting notes of coffee. We went and
He's
saw him.
passionate.
Oh yeah, man. So he left Happy Goat. He told me there's a bit of like a thing there, but he's at.
I never asked.
Yeah, I'll tell you later. What I can recall, whatever, some sort of drama, you know how it goes. But he's at Arlington 5. When we saw him, he was kind of like the coffee manager, and he was there, and he made some sort of. He kind of went off in the corner. I was like, yeah, because I hadn't seen him. We used to rap together, by the way. That's how I know him. So, not in the same group. We performed a bunch together and stuff, and we just knew each other through mutual friends and stuff. But he went off in the corner and made this crazy coffee with some like siphon thing, and it was like this beautiful like pour over type thing. It was wow. And funnily enough, I traded him our glitter beer collab that we did with Echo. So it must have been about this time last year. And he gave me a pack of his collaborative beans with Rabbit Hole out here in Montreal. And if I shit you not, it was to this day the best coffee I've ever had in my entire life. And I
don't doubt it.
It was just fuck, man. I don't know what they do. It was just beautiful. It was just like, and I was using just the V60 pour over, nothing, crazy. And I'm trying to learn how to do it better. I really take coffee seriously, but it was just glorious. It was the most flavorful coffee I've ever had. So like that dude, to know that Carl had something to do with this is wonderful. That's beautiful.
I called him up and I was just like, look, this is what I'm doing. These are the flavors. This is what I'm looking for. And we tasted a couple, and he was just like, "This is what you should go for." And like I'm not the most inquisitive person, and I don't really go around trying to like find something better if I think it's what I'm looking for. I'm not, I'm always trying to make a better beer, but I'm not going to go out and try and find the coffee that's just a little bit better than this one. This one works, and it makes the beer taste the way I want it to, so I stick with it.
So it's perfect. I love it, man. Wow. So Noah, did you see what year you have there, bro?
I believe it's probably 2 years old, so probably the 2019.
19, okay.
I guess.
And what would be the difference between the 20
or maybe not?
Well, this is 2020, so you might have 2018.
Oh yeah, then that would.
Yeah.
So then
that would probably be correct.
So same coffee though, right?
Never used a different coffee.
Never.
No. The beer has actually been brewed the same way every time.
Okay.
So the bourbon barrels, we've had a couple, but we've had Heaven Hill for a while. I think the real thing that is important to me on this beer, which it may not be the way that most people will age their beer in a bourbon barrel for a year.
Okay.
Or more. And for us, actually, I from the first batch, just in tasting it as much as I could, like I really liked a very, very short contact time, like a 4-month contact time.
Okay.
Because I think that the thing that I was not enjoying about some of the bourbon barrel beers I had was I had a glass of bourbon with a bit of beer flavor. But what I really wanted was a beer where the bourbon was an additional ingredient to steer that beer into a direction that would evolve it and make it, ultimately like super pleasurable, because those ingredients, those flavors will work together. I've definitely had some beers aged in bourbon barrels for 1 to 2 years that were absolutely out of this world. But for this one, I think the secret is really short contact time. So it's only in the bourbon barrel for 4 months, which, you know, most people really wouldn't think you would extract much out of it. But I can tell you that the alcohol percentage increases by about 2% in 4 months. So clearly there's quite a bit of work happening during that time.
This is exceptional. My God, you cannot taste this is 11.6. I'm going to be fucking dunzo after
and that's an 11.6 that's lab tested.
It's lab
like
tested.
I send all of our barrel aged beers.
I was like 11.6 and you laughed, but you didn't correct me. Okay, so it's real.
No, it's 11.6. I don't pretend to predict what a barrel can give to a beer. They're all over the place. Sometimes you get a 1% increase, sometimes a 3% increase, sometimes your beer dries out. So anything in a barrel I get lab tested. So it is 11.6%.
Yeah, because this one is 10.5.
That's right. That's right. So the beer that went into this one, we brewed 2 Fortifieds that year. The first one was 4 barrels. And we had a problem on the brew house where we were not getting enough extract out of the malt. Okay. And so I added some dextrose to that to get the gravity up, to get the alcohol we wanted. Well, what dextrose does is it dries the beer out further. So we actually ended up with more alcohol than we set out to do. So it probably went into the barrel at about 10.2, 10.3%. And so then you get up to 11.6, whereas the beer you would have had, Noah, would have gone in at 9.5%.
Right.
And then, you know, add another percentage. And all the barrels are crazy, man. Like every barrel is a different beast. And, you know, we have been lucky enough that we've used at least 90% of the barrels for this beer that were filled, but it's very easy. Like we blend the beers to taste and then decide what barrels are going to be used. Like last year we, you know, I don't know, out of 800 or 1,000 liters, like we left 200 liters out because it didn't make the cut. And then a little bit of another barrel, right? So it's not just a matter of fill 6 barrels, put 6 barrels in. You know, you evaluate them after, but the difference from barrel to barrel is unbelievable.
It's crazy. I like that.
Do you still have, for those listening, do you still have these 4-packs available?
We do, yeah. We've probably sold about half of them, so it'd be nice to.
I need to order myself one and get it sent to Bernie's place.
Yeah,
I watched this year's batch.
So we were going to do.
Do you still have my email address?
Yeah, I think so.
I stopped looking at Facebook like years ago, so I don't know what's on there, but.
Yeah, we were going to, Nate's going to do a nice little write-up on this for the BAOS blog, and I was going to do we have a new video called Beer Drop, so because I have the second pack, I was going to drink one of them and talk about the pack, because I know it's specifically for St. Paddy's Day, right? Which is whatever the fuck next week sometime. So this is for the people who want to get trashed like a good Irish person, you know?
Yeah,
in the best possible way. At home, comfortably.
At home by yourself on your computer.
Yeah, it doesn't get any better. It's been a year of it, bro. Can I ask again, Matt? Sorry to ask this again. What was the coffee that was in this?
It's a Brazilian peaberry coffee.
Brazilian
the actual variety is Vereda.
Vereda?
Vereda, yeah.
Look at me, I can spell. All right, beautiful. Now, this is it's really interesting. I've never really done this before and had 4 different sort of stouts from the same series with essentially a 2% jump each time. It's genuinely.
I mean, you've just had the entire progression of you know, the thought. Basically, you're tasting the thought process.
It's genuinely fascinating, and it's not surprising by any means, the level of just insane, and I'm not just saying this, I always feel like I kind of have to preface it with hey, I'm looking the person in the eye who's making a beer, I'm trying to tell them their shit is fire. We don't have shit breweries on this podcast, so this is just fucking insane.
Yeah, you do.
Regularly, but we're not gonna...
Amazing.
Wow. Noah co-hosts all the ones. If Noah's co-hosting...
I only co-host the good ones.
That's true. I didn't bring Noah. If I'm not... But just watching this progression, man, this is really cool. To see, because I kind of feel like since we did the first one, I haven't delved deep enough in what you do and gotten into it. I've been very fortunate to get a few things here and there. Nate's always hooked me up with stuff. Noah was blessed to share with me that Fortissimo, but I do not remember it because I was fucked.
We just call it triple F where I come from.
The triple F, that'd be a lot easier. Thank you.
Triple F, yeah.
It's just been really nice to see this. Obviously, you know, we knew that the Pils and the saison are going to be fire, and you know, even from a saison non-fan like me, I genuinely appreciated it. No bullshit. I'd tell you if it wasn't for me, but I really enjoyed that. And just seeing this like transition, it's just really cool. And this is just on some other shit. This is like very dangerous. It does not taste what it should. It's impeccably smooth. I mean, I can imagine this will be beautiful even in a couple of years with it, you know, even in a can. I know it's not quite the bottle that Noah had and stuff. Or you usually think of imperial stouts at this level in a bottle, but you know, to stash these, I actually might stash that other can and keep it for a little bit and see how she goes.
Yeah, do so. I mean, you should know it's already a year old.
Because I guess it was 2020. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So we just repackaged what was in stainless. That
glorious, man.
It's interesting, and I don't know if it's because you guys are from Quebec, but like Quebec people love this beer, and I guess there is a beer forum. You're probably both familiar with it, but I'm not. Where there's some guys who will go around to breweries and buy like, you know, a whole shitload of one beer and then disperse it out amongst all their buddies throughout the province. But like,
yeah, there's a bunch
the
of
year we
like
did, the year we did triple F. So it's Stoutstravaganza Day. It's like St. Patrick's Day on a Saturday in my brew pub, and we had a problem with the bottle filler the day before, and it's a Saturday, which means no brewers are working, and they're coming to the Stout Extravaganza to, you know, drink a whole bunch of high octane stouts. And I had already announced all the beers that were coming out, but some of them weren't bottled yet. So I'm sitting there and I'm on a bottling machine that's not working. So of two heads, one of the heads is working. So I'm filling one bottle at a time, and I'm starting at like 9 a.m, and then I see people coming in. Is just jam-packed, and we're selling Fortissimo and a little bit of triple F out the front, and then one of these guys comes from Quebec and he wants 80 bottles of each. And I am literally bottling them, passing them to the retail person one by one, going like 66, 67, 68, wow. 69. And like,
were you at least thinking like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching?
Well, at that point, I'd probably had 2 or 3 of them. So I was, anyways, it was far out there. But it was one of those scenarios where you're literally like packaging for the person who's in the bar buying it. Like, it was outrageous. So yeah, anyways, and then that beer spread across Quebec, and there was just all these great reviews and stuff. So it was pretty awesome for us.
That's great.
And you know, like all those things that happen. I mean, you hope that those kinds of things happen, obviously, but there's a lot of luck involved in some of that stuff, and you never know what beer it is that people are just going to go, that's the one, right? And Fortissimo, I mean, there's so many bourbon barrel-aged stouts out there at the time. I was like, I know this tastes great, but are people going to be able to differentiate that from this bourbon barrel-aged and this bourbon barrel-aged and et cetera, because after a while, everything can start to taste the same. Yeah. So yeah, it was super, super cool. Very, very fun.
I love it. It makes me happy.
And I mean, at the time when you first dropped Fortissimo, and I guess that could even, like, you can even say that for today, but like, I think kind of what we were talking about before, where whenever there's something that is trendy, everyone wants to jump on that, and sometimes they don't put the thought and effort into making it great. And I think, you know, people go completely bonkers for Péché bourbon, even to this day. But Péché bourbon is iconic and classic. But
of course,
4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of people like experimenting with bourbon barreled stouts, but they just weren't doing exceptional jobs with it. Whereas when you put this out, it was comparable to Péché bourbon. And so I think all it takes is like one or two people to be like, yo, this is fucking great. And then you end up in that situation where that guy drives up and buys 80 of them because it's completely worth it. So it's like you caught the ear of the geeks and they're like, oh, this is good. Go get it kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's great. I still remember that day too, because I brought up that last bottle of his order and we were out of the triple F until I could bottle a little bit more. And I literally was like, no, I'm helping you with this to your trunk. like, please allow me to it was
those were pricey bottles too. So that must have been quite the bill.
Well, and that was the one that we had, the full neck
exactly
label and the wax seal and everything. Yeah, they were $16 a bottle or something like that. So
it's cheap.
Yeah,
it was Valor.
Yeah. I mean, for a pint of beer, it's a lot of money. But
for 500 ml
in comparison,
yeah.
Oh,
in
okay.
comparison
back then
to some
too.
People,
yeah, that's true. That's true. But even for 500 ml, no, sorry, I was assuming it was a 750, but that makes sense.
But yeah, the bourbon, the barrel aged stuff is just expensive. I mean, we buy a 500 liter cognac puncheon for Truce, and I mean, delivered to my door, it's like $1,250 for the barrel. So when you're paying that much money for a barrel aged beer, it's like that vessel costs you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And yes, you can reuse it for other projects, but you can't really reuse it for that particular product, right? Because you've just now sucked all the flavor out of it. Hopefully you can get something good and some bacteria growing in there and get a sour beer out of it at some point, or maybe a smaller beer like an English old ale or something and extract a little more out of it. But barrels are a bitch.
Yeah.
I think what I realized right away when I tried your I guess you'd almost call them like double barrel bottles or whatever,
right?
Is that they're worth every penny, right? And I think that's where the challenges come in, where you have other breweries who put out barrel aged beers that just don't hit the mark, and maybe they're a bit cheaper. But when anything I've had from what you've produced was pretty was worth every penny. Like they're quite something.
Yeah, thank you.
Every time I try them.
Yeah, we try to offer the best value we can for our beer too. I mean, it's probably not maybe a conversation for another podcast, but I have no problem spending a good amount of money on beer. But when I spend a good amount of money on beer that is mediocre, I get pissed off. And so for us, we've been, I'm going to hesitate to say criticized, but people have commented that our beer, we could charge more for it. And I mean, maybe we could. I hate the idea of beer and what I believe beer to be and everything about what beer means to me to become an unattainable thing for people to buy. And I know what money we make off our beer, and I know that our business is strong, and I know all these different things. And some people not suffer from, but have to use mobile canning lines, and that puts a great deal of added cost onto the beer. And you just see beer prices keep driving up and up and up. And I think that the beer is worth it, but I don't ever want it to become in a place where it's inaccessible to people. That's the antithesis of why we have beer. So we try to do our best to offer our beers at the lowest price that we feel comfortable with. But we also need to remain competitive and all of that stuff. So I think it's reasonably priced. I don't have any issues with that. It's funny that other people are like, "Oh, dude, you charge way more," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't think a $28 6-pack of 12-ounce shorties for a Pilsner is really. I don't think that's good value." And I'm using those numbers to exaggerate the numbers because that's not the case. But I still really think that beer should be of good value. I think you can produce a world-class product and still you go and buy the world-class products, and they're way cheaper than the craft beers you buy, from local producers. Now we have very different economies of scale, and there are reasons for that. Yeah. But when I can buy a 750 milliliter bottle of saison DuPont for like $6.95, and then the 500 milliliter bottle from some local brewery that's not local, but just like a Canadian brewery that is a pretty mediocre saison, it's $12.50. I think we've created a problem.
Yes, definitely.
I don't believe people are getting what they're paying for in those circumstances. Now, if you've got exceptional products and you want to charge as much as you want out of those because they're rare and exceptional, amazing. And we do need to take part of the beer industry and hold it as high as it deserves. But I don't know. There's some pricing on beers that I shake my head at, going like, for what? What am I paying?
Yeah. Beer definitely has become a whole beast unto itself as far as the pricing. And yeah, it probably should be questioned. I know a lot of it, like whenever I go back to Australia, fucking hell, it's a whole other beast out there. I bet. That's like, I know it's Australia. I know I was drinking imports, but I think for like a half pint, it was like $19. $19.
What?
I'm not joking. And dudes were shouting me because I'm out there seeing my friends. I haven't seen them. I usually see them once a year or so. So I go out there and I'm the one that everyone wants to see. So everyone wants to buy me a beer. So I go to I found a few favorite places and some people I know already out there. It's like try and connect them and stuff. And I go out there and if they had some import, there's one bar specifically, they have some shit that we do not fucking have here. It's like San Diego. Like, Matt, you would know like Bottlecraft. It's like Bottlecraft out there where they have a bottle shop and then in the back is a beer bar, but the most fire beer bar. Like my favorite beer bar right now today in Melbourne have Cantillon on tap, probably charging $20-$25 for 150 ml pour is what my friend
amazing
said. So like the shit is like crazy expensive. So I know that's like a context. And over here, things are pretty crazy, with the hype breweries. We get used to it from the hype. So you're going to pay $25 to $35 maybe for a
well, the hop loads some of these people are using are definitely insanely expensive, right? Like you're talking, like those hop charges are huge.
Insane. I guess what I'm trying to. I don't think they're bleeding.
I can understand that.
I don't think we're being. No. I don't think they're bleeding us for that money. I don't think Masorum or Brewski or Sir John are the ones who are doing that type of stuff. I don't think they're fucking anybody and trying to overcharge.
And I'm probably not referring to those particular. Like if I see some of those beers and I have a very good idea of like the hop loads and stuff, like I can understand it. It's not a cheap time for hops and exactly. the charges we're using are insane.
Right.
So those are probably not the beers I'm referring to. And when you get into whole vanilla beans and chocolate and things, like there are definitely some beers where the ingredients going in are just so pricey.
Yeah, man.
But I see some beers that I look at where I have a pretty good idea of what it would cost to make that beer, and I'm like, wow, you're charging like $4.50 for a little can of a golden ale, or I'm always going to use the exaggerations because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus or anything like that. But
right.
There's definitely some stuff where I just don't believe the value is there for what you're paying. So.
That's a good point. I was only bringing those guys up because they're the ones that I hear people complain about, but also it's not really that fair to complain about that because of the value of it, whether it's their stouts or their IPAs, the hops or the adjuncts. But I guess at the same token, I'm also trying to say that those types of beers have gotten people used to paying a little more for beer. So it's almost just like people are, because of that, the maybe I'm just talking about the beer nerd crowd though, not the average person, but I feel like the beer nerds are just like, oh, well, that's what things cost. Do I want it? Yeah. Then whatever they ask me, they're going to pay for it. They're not really going to complain. Whereas I think the more casual beer fan might be more questioning as to like, oh, it's a short can, you're charging $4.50 for this. Like, why? That's ridiculous. Like, I've had people message BAOS because BAOS is very, we're trying to make beer very accessible to everybody. That was our whole point. So I have a lot of different people who just message me the beers that they're drinking. They just send me beers. I'm sure they do it to all of us, and I think it's super dope because it's just a cool community and they just want to share what they're drinking. I'm like, I love it. So dudes sometimes would send me a Bellwoods beer, like, oh my god, I paid $4.50 for Jutsu. I'll never pay that for a beer in my life. That's ridiculous. But yo, this was fun. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting, cool, man. I'm glad you tried it. Like, so I think there's like a variety. There's like that mentality of the person who thinks $4.50 for a tall can is obscene, but then there's others who would spend $35 on a double IPA with 6 different hops.
For sure.
Triple dry hop.
For
type
sure.
of thing,
For
and
sure.
they'd be cool with that as well. So it's like the whole like, you know, whatever that, you know, the whole scale of different types of people who perceive the value of beer, and it's I guess it really depends. I feel like you guys are kind of like maybe in the middle in the sense of you.
I would say.
Yeah, would you say that too? I wouldn't say you're
Yeah.
but like I could bring, you know, back when you could bring people to beer brews, I could bring my non-beer nerd friends, and they would have a good time because there's a bunch of different good stuff to try. But then me and Noah could go there and have a great night because we drink Vim Vigor and then this shit, like this crazy imperial stouts, and we'd lose our minds. But
and I mean that's the point.
That's where you're at, right?
We're doing,
You've got a bit of both,
and
the best of both worlds.
Everybody's got different things going on for sure.
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, and this is probably too much of a blanket statement, but when you get a number of very popular breweries that are charging an insane amount of money for products because they're using an insane amount of if you have a small brewing system and you're making, you know, a New England double IPA that's got 3 dry hops and whatever, and these dry hops are tens, you know, you're taking 1,000 liters of beer and you're probably releasing 650 liters of those thousands. Then you have to, you know, account for that loss in hops and all this stuff as well. But those small volumes really perpetuate the hype, because if you've undersized your brewery and you are selling out of your beer in a couple of hours, then the people like, I heard your beer's really good, I'm here to grab some. You're like, we don't have any more. Then they're like, I better fucking get on top of this next week when you do a new release. And then that perpetuates the hype because it's like hard to get because it's always sold out because the brewery is undersized. When you put a brewery together and it's oversized because you're trying to do projections, that works completely against you in that whole realm. Because now you have so much beer, but it's like, it's not hard to get because you made enough of it to last a couple of weeks. Right. So it's just a very, very interesting paradigm that happens between those two kind of things. And if you're sitting on a bunch of beer that can last you 2 or 3 weeks because you sized your brewery so that you had stuff around, you can't charge too much extra for that because then it's just going to sit around longer. Right. So, you know, it's just a very interesting thing. Like if I went back and designed the brewery again, I wouldn't do a single thing different because this is our business model. And a lot of people stop to forget that a brewery is a business. You can produce whatever you want. You can be as creative as you want. But the brewery itself is a business that has to function or you won't be there anymore. And so there are all kinds of decisions that go into that the average craft beer drinker would never even stop to wonder because they don't care. It's not their business. They just want a good beer, right? So it's a very interesting space to be a brewer that runs a business who has no business background because it's a pretty quick crash course. A lot of these guys have put together some pretty genius business models. I mean, ours works for us in the way that we want it to. But I see some of these breweries out there and I'm just like, fuck, man, amazing. Good for you. Like, pretty cool.
And I think sometimes it's even somewhat accidental. Like, I don't know, just to talk about Third Moon for a second, like Bebo and Chris are smart. So I'm sure they weren't going into this blind, but at the same time, from their perspective, I think they're like, this is what we love, so this is what we want to make. And then it just so happens that what they love and want to make is what people are going crazy for.
Yeah, for sure.
So like they managed to create this, and the way that like, we asked them a few times, like, oh, were you expecting this type of hype and blah blah blah, and they're like, no, not at all. Like, obviously they're not ignorant to the fact that like these are the styles that people are kind of going crazy for, but like this is just what they love. And they also, like, Bebo especially has like years and years and years of experience as a home brewer, and like has drank a million different styles, and like he even just like told a story about how he went to England and like drank an almost entire cask of ESB because it was like the greatest experience he'd ever had. You know what I mean? Like, but at the end of the day, like what he was most interested in is drinking these types of IPAs. Like it was almost as like it just that's what he ended up falling for, kind of thing. But like it just so happens that that becomes the thing that he loved. But I think that also comes with a huge challenge, as they were explaining too, in the sense of like
they probably
they're
wish
brewing
they
beers that
made a
cost
bigger brewery.
so much money to make, and like their margins are pretty like they're not driving Beamers, you know what I mean? Like they're hustling to get it done, but like they're not making a ton of money off this,
Sure.
and then they have to
Sure.
like deal with the scrutiny of like, oh, you're charging me $7 for a can of fucking beer. They're like, well, that's how much it fucking costs, because
That's how much it costs.
doing this. Like he was even talking about like getting hops off the secondary market, like because he wanted to try this particular type of incognito or whatever. So he bought it like off the secondary market at a higher cost, just so he could use it because he was interested in it, like that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Which all
It's
that's just like
interesting you bring
insane,
up about him drinking the cask of ESB or wanting to and whatever. And it's funny because it's easy for us to pigeonhole brewers into what they like. And I mean, see, you'd get this. It's the same with musicians, right? It's like, like C's a rapper, right? So he only listens to rap, right? Which is, I'm sure, total bullshit. And it's like I continue to go through like all these different, like I'm very inspired by musicians and the way that they've had their own careers, and those who have had long careers with maybe not a billion, fans. And to find out the stuff they listen to, you're just like, oh, wow, really? Like you listen to Joni Mitchell? That's so crazy, because you don't play any music that sounds like Joni Mitchell, and it doesn't come across that there's any Joni Mitchell influence anywhere. And it's like, I still like there are a couple of beer styles that I could kick to the curb, but I still like to drink them all, right? But I'm not going to produce all of those ones. I'm going to produce the ones that I think I'm good at. I'm going to produce the ones that I want to drink every day. I'm going to produce this and that. So like, you never really want to like, that's why when the whole thing about like, oh, go to tooth and nail for classic styles, you might be able to, but I hate being pigeonholed into that thing, because it's like, that's not everything to me. You know what I mean? And I like drinking hazy IPAs. I mean, I haven't had many like pastry stouts and stuff like that. To me, it's just like the sugar in it. It's just not something that agrees with me. I just can't do that. But I'm a beer nut, and most people who decide to brew for a living are beer nuts. So to put them under one umbrella of like, oh, you only produce hazy IPAs because this and that, like that guy still loves an alt beer. He still loves a Pilsner. He still loves probably Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, because I don't know a brewer that doesn't love it. But you get what I'm saying. It's like it's easy just to like assume what someone's kind of outlook is, but really when you get to know them, it's not like that.
It's a really good point, man. Yeah, it's a great parallel with musicians. I got a couple guitars hanging up on the wall. I listen to a bunch of stuff. So yeah, you're right. I totally see that. And it is super unfair, but I guess it's sort of what the public sees. They see like, well, Tooth and Nail does.
They see what you present them.
Exactly. And they don't understand that the person who makes the beer can appreciate everything. Like, I feel
appreciating like everything is what actually makes you make the things you make the way that you make them.
Yeah. Well said.
Right? Like I have my own way of brewing beer that's going to be different from yours, but those influences come into that every day, whether or not I'm producing a beer like that. Those influences always make their way through.
I love that. I think that's super cool. No, it's a beautiful thing. It's
I'm probably going to have to wrap this up at this point.
No, I was about to say it kind of felt
because,
like that. It's 12.
It's a good way to end it.
It's a perfect way to end it, actually. We have to take the thumbnail. So let's do the thumbnail. I'm going to take a screenshot of what we're looking at. Do you guys want to hold up some cans or something? You know what I'm saying? Gonna let the man dem know. That's right. Noah's really got it going.
Should I do?
Oh, you did it. You did it. Make sure I caught it. Make sure I caught it. No, wait. I didn't catch it, Maddie. Hang on.
All right.
Wait. I'm gonna make sure I do. I can't fuck Maddie over here because that would be wow, in Australia that would be called
It's a hard pose to hold.
It's a hard one. Okay, you ready? Oh, that is just glorious. Oh, it's like the craft beer angels brought 3
thought
hairy...
Matt's screen froze because he had it like so down for
like lockjaw. Guys, thank you very much. This has been awesome. 4 years is too long between episodes. Matt, you're such a pleasure to have on, dude. I really respect you and everything you're doing.
You guys are great to hang with.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for the things you guys do for our industry. You know, it's equally as important to have guys like you helping to, prop us up as well. So thank you very much.
Appreciate you, bro.
You're welcome.
You're a legend. Matt, where can everybody online... No, what the fuck do I say? Where can everyone find you online? I'm drinking lots of stouts tonight. Where can everyone find Tooth and Nail online?
Instagram, Facebook, website coming. We have a website coming, I swear to God. It's, our website is like, yeah. We are going to improve some stuff going forward here after the pandemic. But yeah, Instagram's probably the one place that will keep you abreast of what's going on.
Which is at Tooth and Nail Beer.
In limited ways. Oh, God, I don't even know.
It says it on the screen under your beautiful face, man. It says it right there. Tiffany put it there just for you.
That's it.
Look at that. Uncle Mr. Forrest, where can everyone find you online?
Well, as you can see, it's at beerism.ca on Instagram, and on Facebook it's just Beerism, and the website is beerism.ca.
Couldn't be more.
That's
perfect.
where you can find me.
Guys, stick around. I'm just going to wrap this up. Stick around on the call and we'll say goodbye properly. But everybody, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, hit the notification bell so you know when the new drops. Follow us on social media at BAOS Podcast right here. And check us out every Friday. We are here at 9 p.m. Eastern Time with a fantastic podcast with extraordinarily attractive individuals such as Matthew right here, coming through to teach you about beer. Sometimes you don't need a beard. Matthew's like, fuck a beard. I don't need that. I'm going to make fire Pilsner and just be attractive and do my shit. That's what the fuck it is. We'll see you guys next episode. Peace.